My name is Estria, just like the one belonging to the body I've been transmigrated into. In my past life, I was a world-famous actor. An award-winning, red carpet-dominating, 5-time box office legend. People called me a genius on screen. I lived the dream: fame, fortune, admiration. But beyond the camera, I had hobbies too. I enjoyed poker. Loved a good gamble. But above all else, I loved reading. Books of every genre: horror, fantasy, sci-fi. I didn't care what it was, as long as the synopsis hooked me. And of course, that included academy novels. You know the ones, where protagonists are either nameless extras, washed-up professors, or misunderstood villains. There's usually just one academy. It's either the strongest in the world, or about to be. It was a guilty pleasure. I devoured dozens of them. Then yesterday, I was reading one such novel before bed. And when I woke up, I was here. In this body. And a floating panel appeared before my eyes. Thankfully, I also inherited the memories of this Estria. The real one. His life? Pretty miserable at the start. He failed to get into the academy of his dreams and ended up in the weakest of them all. But fate had a twist. He was a late bloomer, and what a bloom it was. He awakened multiple rare talents and quickly climbed the ranks. Now, in his 3rd year, he's considered the strongest student at the weakest academy. And I arrived, just in time for the inter-academy competition. Quite the hard worker, huh? Ha! A long sigh escaped my lips. Because let's be honest, I got transmigrated at the worst possible time. The competition between academies was about to begin, a brutal, high-stakes event meant to determine the continent's strongest school. And I just happened to land in the role of the academy's biggest hope. Currently, I'm on board one of the academy's flying ships, heading toward the capital city, Eternum, in the Eternal Country. Yeah, real creative. Ahem. Tap tap. A knock pulled me from my thoughts. MHM? Who is it? It's me. The door creaked open, and a gentle voice followed. My teacher, Vivian, stepped in, her crimson lips curling into a soft smile. How are you feeling? Better now. That's a relief. She sat beside me on the bed. We were all worried. Our best student passing out just before the competition? Everyone panicked. She laughed lightly and met my eyes. Oh, and I brought what you asked for. She handed me a stack of papers. I scanned through them, and couldn't help but grin. Perfect. It was the basic information on the students I'd be facing. The only problem? The first round is a team battle. And my own team might just hold me back. Oh, and there's going to be one extra exam. They're keeping it secret for now, Vivian added with a frown. Thanks, teacher. She smiled warmly, gave my shoulder a pat, and stood up. Anything for my star student, she said before leaving the room. Once alone, I turned back to the documents. Lucas Heartstone, rank C+. Ellis C. Alistair, rank B-. Rose Firefly, rank B. MHM. Of all the Academy novels, I ended up in this one, ha. Another sigh. The Academy's True Hero. A novel that followed a fairly straightforward path. No transmigrations. No reincarnations. Just the story of a boy named Lucas, who trained in secret and fought demons within the walls of Eternum Academy, the continent's strongest. The twist? Lucas only appeared weak. Despite being rank C+, he had already slain thousands of demons. He was the hidden light affinity wielder. With a system. A monster in disguise. And now, I'm supposed to go up against him. Even worse? The heroines are no slouches either. Ellis C. Alistair, second princess of the Empire, almost mastered the royal sword art, an SS rank technique. Rose Firefly, fire magic prodigy, capable of casting high-tier 5th and possibly 6th circle spells. Her real rank? Easily in the A range. Yeah, best case scenario? Avoid fighting them altogether. Each academy competes in 5 rounds. We need to win at least 3 to advance. 2 academies will be eliminated, and the final 3 will enter a dual-style elimination. That means students will take turns entering the arena, and the academy with the most individual wins goes on. The final round? All-out war. One academy versus another. Every student fights. The last one standing wins. And I've got 2 weeks before the competition begins. Time to train. Hard. It's a pity though. I hadn't finished this novel. It had over 500 chapters, and I was only halfway through before getting dragged in. Talk about terrible timing. And one more thing. Why don't I remember anything about Estria in the novel? I'd heard of the Moonlight Swordsman, his legendary alias, but not much else. Did he die before the competition? Or was something else going on?
Tap tap. Another knock. Estria.
We've arrived at the capital. I looked out the window. Welcome to Eternum. Let the games begin. My name is Estria, just like the one belonging to the body I've been transmigrated into. In my past life, I was a world-famous actor. An award-winning, red carpet-dominating, 5-time box office legend. People called me a genius on screen. I lived the dream: fame, fortune, admiration. But beyond the camera, I had hobbies too. I enjoyed poker.
Loved a good gamble.
But above all else, I loved reading. Books of every genre: horror, fantasy, sci-fi. I didn't care what it was, as long as the synopsis hooked me. And of course, that included academy novels. You know the ones, where protagonists are either nameless extras, washed-up professors, or misunderstood villains. There's usually just one academy. It's either the strongest in the world, or about to be. It was a guilty pleasure. I devoured dozens of them. Then yesterday, I was reading one such novel before bed. And when I woke up, I was here.
In this body.
And a floating panel appeared before my eyes. Thankfully, I also inherited the memories of this Estria.
The real one. His life? Pretty miserable at the start.
He failed to get into the academy of his dreams and ended up in the weakest of them all.
But fate had a twist.
He was a late bloomer, and what a bloom it was. He awakened multiple rare talents and quickly climbed the ranks. Now, in his 3rd year, he's considered the strongest student at the weakest academy. And I arrived, just in time for the inter-academy competition. Quite the hard worker, huh?
Ha!
A long sigh escaped my lips. Because let's be honest, I got transmigrated at the worst possible time. The competition between academies was about to begin, a brutal, high-stakes event meant to determine the continent's strongest school. And I just happened to land in the role of the academy's biggest hope. Currently, I'm on board one of the academy's flying ships, heading toward the capital city, Eternum, in the Eternal Country. Yeah, real creative.
Ahem. Tap tap.
A knock pulled me from my thoughts.
MHM? Who is it? It's me.
The door creaked open, and a gentle voice followed. My teacher, Vivian, stepped in, her crimson lips curling into a soft smile. How are you feeling? Better now. That's a relief. She sat beside me on the bed. We were all worried. Our best student passing out just before the competition? Everyone panicked. She laughed lightly and met my eyes. Oh, and I brought what you asked for. She handed me a stack of papers. I scanned through them, and couldn't help but grin.
Perfect.
It was the basic information on the students I'd be facing.
The only problem?
The first round is a team battle. And my own team might just hold me back. Oh, and there's going to be one extra exam. They're keeping it secret for now, Vivian added with a frown.
Thanks, teacher.
She smiled warmly, gave my shoulder a pat, and stood up. Anything for my star student, she said before leaving the room. Once alone, I turned back to the documents.
Lucas Heartstone, rank C+.
Ellis C. Alistair, rank B-. Rose Firefly, rank B.
MHM.
Of all the Academy novels, I ended up in this one, ha. Another sigh. The Academy's True Hero. A novel that followed a fairly straightforward path. No transmigrations. No reincarnations. Just the story of a boy named Lucas, who trained in secret and fought demons within the walls of Eternum Academy, the continent's strongest.
The twist?
Lucas only appeared weak. Despite being rank C+, he had already slain thousands of demons. He was the hidden light affinity wielder.
With a system. A monster in disguise.
And now, I'm supposed to go up against him.
Even worse?
The heroines are no slouches either. Ellis C. Alistair, second princess of the Empire, almost mastered the royal sword art, an SS rank technique. Rose Firefly, fire magic prodigy, capable of casting high-tier 5th and possibly 6th circle spells.
Her real rank?
Easily in the A range. Yeah, best case scenario? Avoid fighting them altogether. Each academy competes in 5 rounds. We need to win at least 3 to advance. 2 academies will be eliminated, and the final 3 will enter a duel-style elimination. That means students will take turns entering the arena, and the academy with the most individual wins goes on.
The final round? All-out war.
One academy versus another.
Every student fights.
The last one standing wins.
And I've got 2 weeks before the competition begins. Time to train. Hard. It's a pity though.
I hadn't finished this novel. It had over 500 chapters, and I was only halfway through before getting dragged in. Talk about terrible timing. And one more thing. Why don't I remember anything about Estria in the novel? I'd heard of the Moonlight Swordsman, his legendary alias, but not much else. Did he die before the competition? Or was something else going on?
Tap tap. Another knock. Estria.
We've arrived at the capital. I looked out the window. Welcome to Eternum. Let the games begin.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
I'll bring your table server right away.
Thanks.
After ordering for all 16 of us, I noticed the nearby table stealing nonstop glances at me. Their curiosity wasn't that subtle, and I could practically feel their stares. They must have heard everything, huh? Anyway, everyone seems pretty excited about the competition. It was good to see, but my plans were a bit too complicated. I still needed to finish my preparations, and 2 weeks wasn't much time. I'd have to come up with an excuse to slip away and handle what needs to be prepared. I'll need to get better equipment and probably will need to train my secondary weapon. Which is a gun, more precisely a model similar to a Desert Eagle. So, I'm thinking of stealing one of the protagonist's opportunities, which is the morph weapon. A weapon that doesn't have a necessary aspect. It could transform into any weapon, sword, gun, axe, whatever you needed. I'm sure it doesn't really matter to Lucas, since in the future, he'll receive an even more overpowered weapon. The only unfortunate thing is that past the Academy's competition, I don't have much knowledge about the novel. But, let's not worry about that for now.
Estria.
Go request a song already.
Yeah, pick something good.
Nothing too boring.
These kids.
Alright, I'm on it. A sigh escaped my mouth as I stood up. The pianist was playing something soft and soothing as I approached him. I requested a famous tune from our region, something that could please my classmates. Thankfully, he knew the song. After sorting the payment with him and the maid, I started heading back to my table. And that's when it happened.
Thud.
Something, or rather someone, crashed into me. A flash of silver filled my vision, and before I knew it, Ella was on the floor, mumbling softly.
Ow.
She looked up, her wide, startled eyes locking onto mine. Her silver hair shimmered in the cafe's lighting, and her face, well, it was the color of a tomato. She froze, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words.
Are you okay?
I asked with a soft tone. I really didn't see her coming. I am fine. She finally managed to squeak out, bowing her head so quickly I thought she would hit the table next. That's great. I let out a relieved sigh.
PFFF.
The sounds of laughter reached my ears. From the corner of my eye, I noticed her table watching us closely. One of the girls, a lively-looking one with a sly grin, was barely hiding her laughter behind her hand. While Rose adjusted her glasses while smirking slightly. Lucas sitting with them didn't look as entertained. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, his spoon pausing mid-stir in his coffee.
Oh.
I almost forgot that he has a crush on Ella. Well, not like I care about it though. Sorry about that, Ella stammered embarrassingly, stepping back like she wasn't sure if she should stay or bolt. Don't worry, princess, I didn't see you coming either. I smiled back at her. P princess? Her eyes widened significantly.
Ah.
I nearly forgot that her identity had not yet been made public. So, I need to quickly make an excuse.
Think.
My lips quickly curled into a softer yet charming smile as I added. With such beautiful and unique hair, if you're not a princess, who is? Thank you. Ella's face, somehow, turned an even deeper shade of red. Her wide eyes blinked rapidly, and she stammered. It was quite funny, she didn't know how to reply to my words. She bowed again, this time a little slower, clearly trying to regain her composure. Behind her, the lively girl from her table was practically in tears from holding back laughter, while the one with glasses, Rose, adjusted them yet again, her smirk widening. As for the other now, she had her head buried in the table, don't know why.
Lucas, though? He didn't look happy. Not one bit.
Guess I hit a nerve there. Ella fidgeted on the spot, unsure of what to do next, so I decided to ease the tension.
Be careful next time, alright?
We wouldn't want you running into anyone else.
All right, she squeaked, stepping back.
But then, realizing how awkward she looked, she dipped her head once more and hurried back to her table. As she plopped into her seat, her friends immediately leaned in, whispering and giggling like they'd just witnessed the juiciest gossip of the year. Lucas only glared at me before averting his gaze from mine. Shaking my head with a small smile, I returned to my table. Sorry for taking so long.
Oh, what happened?
One of my classmates asked, grinning like he'd just caught me doing something scandalous.
Yeah, who was that?
She looked like she saw a ghost.
Nothing.
She just bumped into me, that's all.
Just bumped into you, huh?
A girl sitting across from me raised an eyebrow. Didn't look like just anything from where I was sitting. Stop making it a thing. I rolled my eyes to the side. Sure, she teased, leaning back with a smug smile.
These kids.
As we left the cafe, the streets were bathed in the soft, golden light of the setting sun, making the city feel alive in ways that made my quiet academy seem like a distant memory. Students scattered in all directions, laughing and chatting, as they decided where to go next. I stayed a few paces behind, letting the energy of the city wash over me. It was a far cry from the peacefulness of the academy. I'll need to act as fast as possible. So tonight should be a good time to start. The morph weapon is one of the underground labs, which means that I'll need to go to the black market first. Lucas normally would get it a day before the competition because he accidentally meets a little girl who was running away from robbers and immediately beats them up. Then, he talks with a little girl and gets news about an experiment lab that focuses on making weapons using virgin blood. And children are the first target of them because they have the purest blood for this kind of thing. Of course, the first thing I'm doing is destroying the lab. I'm no hero, but this kind of messed up thing needs to be obliterated of the face of the earth. However, getting into the black market isn't necessarily an easy thing because I don't have a pass or card for it. It seems that I'll have to do it the hard way.
A forced entry.
The black market guards should be in the middle stages of B rank, so I should be able to deal with them. I only need to be lucky enough to not meet one of the black market's bosses. More especially, Yara Devereaux. She's the person who holds the most shares of the black market, holding a perfect 51% that grants her authority over the entirety of the black market. Lucas meets her when he destroys the laboratory, and she has been interested in him since that point. And for their future relationship.
I don't know.
Never go into that part. So yeah, I just need to avoid them. Oi, Estrella, you coming or what? One of my classmates called out, snapping me from my thoughts. Yeah, I'm coming. For now, I'll play along and enjoy this moment of peace. But once everyone settled in for the night, I'd make my move.
Lucas POV.
Ella slid back into her seat, her cheeks still bright red from bumping into him. I felt bothered, really bothered. At least, now I know why she's rejecting my advances. Well, that looked interesting. Maya was the first to tease Ella, leaning in with a mischievous grin.
That's normal.
Maya is quite a social butterfly and loves teasing people.
Shut up.
Ella stammered, glaring at her, but her expression lacked real intensity. Interesting is an understatement, Rose said, pushing up her glasses.
I'm quite surprised.
You were frozen for at least 3 seconds. And don't think I didn't hear what he called you, princess. She doesn't show smiles, but now she's teasing Ella. It was romantic though.
Iris giggled. Romantic?
Ella squeaked before hiding her face with her hands. As for me, I didn't join in. I stirred my coffee absently as my gaze turned toward him, Estrella, the so-called moonlight swordsman. He was quite the celebrity after all, his identity was on par with mine. However, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. He's too, how should I say it?
Calm, no. Perfect.
Even his smile doesn't even feel real. Like an actor. After all, even a successful actor can't fake emotions perfectly. And Estrella seems just like that. And then's when a thought struck me.
System, scan him. Ding.
A soft chime echoed in my head as the system activated. The familiar loading bar appeared in the corner of my vision, but then...
Error.
Data inaccessible.
What?
I frowned deeply, my fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Target classified under restricted parameters.
Access denied.
Restricted? What kind of nonsense was that? I glanced at Estrella again. He was smiling faintly, chatting casually with his group. Who are you, Estrella?
No.
Ella's flustered protests suddenly snapped me out of my thoughts. Ella, you should have asked for his number.
I'm serious. Stop it.
Relax. They continued arguing. But I ignored it since my mind was occupied with something else. I could even scan the headmaster, who is one of the strongest people in the world.
But I cannot scan Estrella? That's weird. Estrella's POV.
The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale glow over the quiet city streets. By now, my classmates had finally settled in for the night, which allowed me to sneakily get out by the window.
Anyways.
The black market wasn't far, but it wasn't exactly easy to find either. It was mentioned in the novel that it was buried beneath an abandoned warehouse located on the 17th street of the capital.
And here I am.
I did take a good look around and didn't see anyone. Is it really here? Slowly, I approached one of the abandoned buildings and slipped in through the window. The windows were shattered. The walls were covered with years of decay. A gentle rustle in the air made the old structure groan, but no other sounds reached my ears.
Bingo.
Standing next to a swirly purple portal, held by two stone hands of giants, stood two men in black suits facing the portal. Each of them grasped a modified firearm, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of potential danger. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. Without thinking twice, I activated one of my skills. This one in particular could tell me if one person was evil or good as well as their weak points. And also, their rank and combat power couldn't escape my eyes. 2 B ranks, should be durable. I brought out my sword from my waist and silently channeled mana to my legs.
Zooing.
My body shot forward like a lightning bolt. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art.
First move.
Ice Lotus Bloom. The sword in my hand shimmered with an icy glow as I swung it downwards.
Bam.
An ice lotus erupted at the center of the guards, its crystalline petals unfurling before shattering in an explosion of ice.
Chill.
A wave of freezing cold swept across the floor, encasing everything in its path. The guards never even had time to move, their bodies frozen mid-movement, their breaths missed. Satisfied, I stepped past their frozen forms and approached the portal. I pulled out a simple masquerade mask and slipped it on, adjusting my hood.
Perfect.
Without another word, I stepped into the swirling purple portal. It felt unreal, as if I'd been dunked in ice water without getting wet. I came out the other side. It was colder out, the atmosphere thicker. I found myself standing on a dark street with slick cold stones beneath my feet. Both sides of the road were lined by merchant stalls. Their owners hawked their wares in hushed tones. The crowd here was unlike anything from the capital, hooded figures haggling over artifacts that shimmered with dangerous energy, others speaking about deals that would never see the light of day. This was the black market. Pulling my hoodie tighter, I followed the street, making myself aware of my surroundings. I made my way to a specific place where one could see the waters of the sewers falling into a polluted river. In the black market, anything can happen, and I need to be prepared at all costs. If I'm not entirely wrong, the lab was found in one of the high sky buildings. And Lucas escaped from the lab by the sewers. So, I decided to enter the sewers.
Clamp.
I entered one of the sewer's giant pipes.
Disgusting.
The air was thick and rancid, the stench of rotting waste and stagnant water filling every breath. It felt like it clung to my skin, seeping into my clothes. The damp walls were coated with a slimy green mold that glistened under the faint light from my mana orb. The water beneath my feet was a slow-moving black sludge, and I had to step carefully on the narrow walkway along the edge to avoid slipping. Could they have picked a worse hiding spot? I mumbled in annoyance. Although this wasn't the main entrance, it was the best I could use if I wanted to get out of the lab safely. I kept moving, the sounds of dripping water and distant scurrying filling the air, and after a while, I came across a section of the pipe that looked different. The walls here were newer, reinforced with metal plating. It should be around here. Placing my hands on the metal pipes, I quickly channel mana into my hands before trying to twist them. Great. I jumped in and found a vent where I immediately entered without making any noise. Crawling through the vents, the sound of some kind of machine running along with a chemical smell reached out to me, so I followed the noise. After a few minutes, I reached another vent.
Is this it?
I stopped, peering through the narrow slats into the room below.
Ah.
My breath hitched. It was a huge laboratory with gleaming, polished floors and walls lined with glowing screens displaying data streams that I couldn't read. The room was dominated by a large capsule filled with a thick, glowing green fluid. Inside it was a girl with slimy, semi-transparent blue hair and unnaturally bright green eyes. What caught my attention next was the weapon resting on a platform beside her, sleek and metallic, but the strangest part was the thick, pulsing string-like cable that connected it to the capsule and to her.
Fuck. My stomach twisted.
They're using deviants to make weapons? No wonder this morph weapon was so powerful in the novel. It was made from the abilities of a slime-type deviant. Its ability to change forms that will made it the perfect source for a weapon that could adapt to anything. I need to act quickly. But before I could plan my next move, a voice boomed through the room.
Ha 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 ha. It's done.
The voice was hoarse, filled with some kind of manic glee. I shifted slightly for a better view. An old man, hunched and draped in a long stained lab coat, shuffled towards the capsule. His eyes were wild, and his thin gray hair stuck out at odd angles. My final project. The morph weapon is complete. He cackled, his bony hands shaking as he reached for a big red button on the control panel.
Damn it.
The instant his hand struck the button, the room burst into a flurry of activity. The green fluid in the capsule drained quickly, and the slime girl's body jerked and contorted as the weapon pulsed with a sickly glow. I didn't have time to think.
Bam.
I kicked the vent with all my strength, sending it flying straight for the old man. The metal panel crashed into him, knocking him backward into the control panel. Sparks flew as he stumbled, but he caught himself, his head snapping up to glare at me.
Oh.
It seems we have an intruder. His thin lips curled into a smile that sent a chill down my spine. I dropped into the room, drawing my sword in one smooth motion. My gaze locked with his. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. An A+ ranker? His mana signature was overwhelming, the kind that screamed trouble. Not to mention the ominous dark aura around him.
Pure evil.
This was about to be a damned problem. The air in the lab was heavy and thick, reeking of chemicals and burnt metal. It was strangely quiet now, except for the faint sound of machinery humming softly. Estria stood amidst the chaos, his frame tense and alert as he looked at the old man standing across from him. The man grinned, his crooked teeth yellowed with age. His wild gray hair framed a face that was half mad with excitement. And in his hand was clasped around a staff, its head aglow with pulsating dark energy. So, the old man said in a voice that was raspy yet steady, a rat sneaks into my lab and thinks he can stop me? Estria didn't reply. His expression was calm, blank even, but his sword was already raised, glowing faintly as a silver mana pulsed through it. The old man tilted his head as his grin widened.
No words?
Fine, let's see how long you can stay silent. With a wave of his staff, a bolt of dark energy shot toward Estria.
Boom.
The explosion rocked the lab, scattering debris across the floor as Estria dodged to the side, his movements fluid and precise. He didn't waste a second, charging forward with mana-enhanced speed.
Swish.
His blade sliced through the air, aiming straight for the old man's chest.
Clang.
The man blocked the strike with his staff, and the clash sent sparks flying. You're quite fast. The man said with a small smile as he parried Estria's sword back.
But it still isn't enough, he grinned.
Estria ignored his words, and instead, he pulled back his sword and swung again, this time aiming for the man's legs. The old man jumped, avoiding his sword and retaliating with a downward strike of his staff. Bang! Estria ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow as the staff hit the floor, cracking the reinforced metal beneath it.
First move.
Ice Lotus Bloom. Estria's sword glowed brighter as a faint silver aura enveloped it, and in a flash, he cut upwards. An ice lotus formed mid-air, its petals spun rapidly before shooting toward the old man. Crack! The ice crashed into the hastily erected barrier, freezing it upon contact. Shards of frost scattered across the room, and the man stumbled back, his grin faltering for a moment. Damn it, you fucking brat. He raised his staff again, calling upon a wave of black spikes to erupt from the floor and go towards Estria. Shhhhk. The spikes tore through the air, but Estria was faster. He leaped into the air, flipping nimbly and landing behind the old man. Clang! Their weapons clashed once more, their sparks flying as Estria pressed on. The old man grunted, his movements were no longer fluid as struggled to keep up. Damn you! Thud. Estria's shoe connected with the man's stomach, sending him flying backward. He coughed, clutching his side as he stared daggers at Estria. You fucking brat. He insanely slammed his staff into the ground, and the dark energy surrounding it pulsed outward in a massive shockwave. Shit. This time, even Estria couldn't dodge. Bam. The force sent Estria flying, his back hitting the wall with a sickening breaking bones sound. Act this. I broke a rib. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as he staggered to his feet, one hand clutching his side. Pain radiated from his ribs, but he kept his calm. The old man laughed loudly, the sound echoing across the lab.
Hurts, doesn't it?
That is what happens when one goes up against a more powerful being. Estrella wiped the blood off his mouth and looked at the man. He clenched his sword tightly and then took a step forward. Alright, I got the hang of it now. He's only an A+ ranker because his mana is desperately powerful. So, it should be even easier than dealing with a C+ rank demon beast. The old man's laughter faltered. What's with that fucking look, you brat? Estrella didn't respond. Instead, he lifted his sword once more, the blade shining brighter as his silver mana coursed through it.
First move. Ice Lotus Bloom. That move again?
Do you think it will work once again? The man scoffed as he quickly raised a dark barrier around himself. However, something changed.
Reversal.
Bloom of the Ice Lotus. The icy petals formed once again, spinning violently in midair. However, they didn't shoot directly toward the man's barrier this time. Instead, they split apart, circling the room like a whirlwind of frost. The old man's confidence wavered.
What the?
Crack. The frost began to creep up from beneath him, where his barrier didn't cover. The swirling petals coalesced into sharp shards of ice, piercing through the weak spots in his defense. Argh! He screamed, the ice slicing into his legs and forcing him to his knees.
The attack didn't stop.
The ice crawled over the barrier, creeping inward as the petals closed in. Each shard shattered upon contact, releasing more frost and creating a web of cracks across the dark barrier. Crack! The barrier broke, sending icy shards flying throughout the lab.
No!
The old man roared angrily, his staff slamming into the ground once more to send another shockwave out.
Boom!
The force sent the shards flying, but the strain was evident in the trembling of his hands. His breathing turned labored as he struggled to stand. Estrella didn't give him a moment to recover. His sword came down in an arc, aiming for the man's exposed shoulder.
Clang!
The staff met the sword, but the man's grip faltered. You're just a child.
How are you?
Thud. Estrella drove his knee to the man's stomach, automatically cutting off his words and making him gasp in pain. The man stumbled back, coughing violently as he tried to raise his staff again. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. A faint glow danced in Estrella's red eyes, analyzing the man's weaknesses.
Left side exposed.
Weak point at the ribs.
He didn't hesitate. Swing.
The blade cut through the air, slicing deep into the man's side. The blood spattered across the floor, and the man yelled in pain.
Ag!
You little bastard! He screamed, desperation filtering in his voice. A whirlwind of dark mana surrounded him, making Estrella take a few steps back. I can't lose to a brat like you, he muttered. His voice was trembling, his body was quivering. I've worked too hard for this. I won't let it end here. He raised his staff one last time, the dark energy gathering into a massive orb at its tip. The air grew heavier, and the ground beneath them cracked under the pressure. However, seeing this, Estrella remaining calm expression, suddenly smiled. He reached out to his waist and pulled something out of it.
This.
No. The man immediately tried to revert his spell, which had quite a long time to be launched.
But Estrella only smiled.
Ice bullet, gunslinger ice magic.
Zooing.
A bullet was shot towards the old man, making a hole in his chest before his body started turning into an ice statue at the speed of the naked eye. The giant dark orb that he was about to launch disappeared into wisps, and those wisps quickly came back to him, unfreezing him.
Too late.
Estrella, who was now in front of him, muttered to him in a cold tone. The man fell to his knees, blood dripping from his mouth as he clutched at the shards of ice embedded in his body. His staff clattered to the ground, the dark energy fading. You monster! He muttered, trying to back away from Estrella. With each meter he crawled back, Estrella also took a step forward, his blood-red eyes glowing ominously in the dim light. The man's breath hitched as he looked into those ominous eyes, his body trembling with nothing other than fear. Stay back! He cried, his voice breaking. You're not human. You're a demon. Estrella raised his sword. Sweep. The blade came down in a quick, merciless arc, severing the man's head from his body. Splurt. Thud. The headless corpse slumped to the floor, with blood pooling beneath it. The only sound in the room now was the soft hum of machinery somewhere in the distance. Estrella stood over the body, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. His blood-red eyes clouded slightly as he cleaned his blade and turned toward the capsule containing the slime girl. It still wasn't over yet. Now, how do I solve this? I pondered, looking at the slime girl floating inside the capsule. Her thin, slimy body glowed faintly in the dim red lights. The green of her eyes was lifeless, staring into nothing. Not knowing what to do with something like this sucks. Most especially when you are stuck in the middle of an enemy lab and alarms are probably just seconds from blaring. Whatever, let's be rough. I cracked my knuckles. I moved closer to the capsule, gathering mana into my fist. It shimmered faintly, frost licking at my knuckles. Without hesitation, I swung. Crash. The glass exploded outward, scattering shards across the lab floor. A thick blue liquid gushed from the capsule, splattering my boots and soaking the floor. I caught the slime girl as she slid out. Her body was surprisingly light but strange. Gurgly. Her form shifted a little in my arms, cool and slippery, like trying to hold a bag of jelly. For a second, I froze, weirdly uncomfortable. Gurgly. Her body is slimy indeed. Ahem. Setting her down gently, I moved to the other capsule, where the morph weapon rested. I didn't know if it would still be able to change its aspect because there was no slime girl when Lucas got this weapon. So, I don't know if it will work. Gathering mana again, I punched the capsule. Crash. The glass exploded as it had before, and I grasped the weapon. This time, it was a hatchet, but it vibrated in my hand with a faint hum, as if it were alive. Alright, that's 2 for 2. I glanced back at the girl. She looked fragile, unconscious but breathing, her form shifting slightly like a calm pool of water. I didn't know how much time I had, but I was glad she was alive. Threeing. Fuck. Red lights flashed everywhere, bathing the lab in an angry glow. The high-pitched wail of the alarm echoed loudly. My gaze snapped to the capsule, where a small plaque blinked, safety measure activated. I didn't notice it. Damn it. The vents. I needed to get her out before whoever triggered the alarm showed up. Immediately, I moved back to the vent and gritted my teeth when I noticed that we couldn't get out together. I would need to push her into the vent, and that would take quite a long time. Wait. When Lucas escaped, there was a giant vent mentioned. I took a deep look around, my eyes constantly flinching due to the flashing red lights, but I ignored it and searched fanatically. But the vent wasn't anywhere. Not in the walls, not in the ceiling, not even hidden behind the equipment. Shit. Nothing. I muttered in annoyance. Oi. A sudden shout made me whip around. A group of people in black uniforms stormed into the lab with their weapons at the ready. Their gaze locked on me instantly, and I could easily feel their hostility towards me. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. My vision distorted, glowing softly as their details snapped into view. All are B-level rankers. Every single one of them. This was bad, really bad. And they didn't waste any time. One of them barked an order, and the group advanced with their weapons pointed at me. Put her down now. I didn't respond. Talking wasn't going to solve anything either way. I forced my entry here. With the slime girl cradled awkwardly in one arm, I tightened my grip on the morph weapon with the other. I didn't have any experience with a hatchet, so I hung it on my waist and sheathed my sword since it was my main weapon. The first one lunged. Clang. His sword clashed with mine, sparks flying as I parried his attack. Taking the opportunity, I ducked and then drove my knee into his gut. He crumpled to the floor with a grunt, but the others didn't hesitate. 3 more came at me simultaneously. Shing. I barely deflected the spear while twisting myself out of the way of a blade angled toward my neck. Then, the third swung an enormous mace, and I ducked at just the right moment. It slammed into the wall behind me with an ear-splitting crash. You're dead meat. One snarled, swinging at my legs. Sweep. I jumped back, narrowly avoiding the blade, but my footing faltered on the slick floor, and I had to adjust quickly to keep my balance. Slam. One of them aimed a kick at my side, and I had no choice but to take the hit. Pain shot through my ribs as I staggered back, gritting my teeth to stay upright. Damn it. I cursed, shifting the slime girl's weight in my arm. Her unconscious form was making this way harder than normal. The guards didn't let me rest. Another one came from the left and swung a twin-headed axe directed at my waist. Clang. I blocked the first but had to pivot to avoid the second. As I did so, I swung the sword in an upward manner. Crack. It slammed into his shoulder and sent him sprawling, drawing out blood. But there was no time to catch my breath. 2 more charged in, one wielding a dagger and the other a broadsword. The dagger wielder went low, aiming for my legs, while the broadsword swung high. I gripped the slime girl's body a bit more, ducking under the broadsword before taking the opportunity to deliver a strong kick at the dagger wielder's knee. Thud. He went down with a small cry of pain, but the broadsword user quickly recovered and swung directly at my head. I immediately raised the sword with just one hand, the force of the impact jolting my arm. Ha! I pushed forward against his blade and twisted my sword to knock it out of his hands. Clang. His sword hit the ground, and I drove my elbow into his jaw, sending him crashing into a nearby table. The other guards hesitated, re-evaluating. I could see it in their eyes. They hadn't anticipated this much resistance or strength. But I was struggling too. My breaths were coming faster now, my ribs screaming in protest every time I moved. Don't let him escape. The seeming leader of them stepped forward with a glaive in hand.
Of course.
Fucking bastard. He lunged, the blade of his glaive cutting through the air in my direction.
Swoop.
I twisted, narrowly avoiding it, and struck back with my sword.
Clang.
The blades clashed, and the concussion ran up my arm. I moved in, pushing him backward until another guard found an opening from behind.
Thwack. Kook.
A heavy weapon struck the back of my body and sent me stumbling forward, gasping as pain shot around my body. The leader grinned sinisterly and raised his glaive again.
You're done.
But I wasn't going to give up. Even if I couldn't use my sword art because I needed to wield the sword with both of my hands, I still had a huge amount of experience in killing demon beasts.
Much less humans.
Gathering what strength I had left, I shifted the slime girl in my arm and swung my sword upwards. Crack! It caught the glaive, knocking it off balance. Using the opening, I drove a mana-infused kick into his chest.
Thud.
He flew back, crashing into a control panel. The others hesitated for a moment, but their hesitation cost them. Since the battle began, I was also inserting a bit of mana into the morph weapon, to see if it actually worked. And now I understand how it worked. Basically, I understand it now. I put my sword to my waist, switching it with the morph weapon, and then channeled what little mana I had left into it. The weapon glowed weakly, its blade slightly shifting as it morphed into a long hooked scythe.
Swoosh.
I swung it in a wide arc, sending the guards scrambling. But the leader recovered quickly, his glaive glowing with dark energy as he charged at me once more.
Bang!
He brought the glaive down with a crushing force, which sent shockwaves around the lab. Equipment flew everywhere, and
crash, was sent flying.
I slammed hard into the wall as my body protested with screams and went sliding down to the floor. Damn. Everything went fuzzy for a moment as my mind commanded my legs to lift me off the ground, and through it all, I managed to spot something underneath the capsules.
A huge vent.
It had been hidden by the bulky equipment, but now with everything thrown around, it was clear as day. There you are. I gritted my teeth in annoyance. The guards were regrouping, closing in on me fast. And I did not have the energy to fight anymore. Collecting the last of my mana, I slammed the morph weapon into the ground. Crack! Ice spread instantaneously, forming a thick, fortified wall between the guards and me. He's trying to escape. One of them shouted. I ignored them, sprinting towards the vent with the slime girl still in my arms. The red lights were still flashing, the alarm still blaring, but I didn't stop. Reaching the vent, I kicked it open and slid inside, the cold metal scraping against my back as I crawled forward as fast as I could. Behind me, the guards were pounding on the ice wall, their shouts growing fainter as I moved deeper into the vent. Finally, the noise faded, and I allowed myself to take a deep, shaky breath. Made it for now. I muttered, clutching my side as pain flared up again. Gurgly. The slime girl shifted slightly in my arm, her soft gurgle the only sound in the suffocating silence of the vent. How am I going to explain to the Saintess? Looking at my gruesome injuries that would make an average Joe limp if not pass out, I pondered, thinking of a familiar figure in my mind. The Saintess of the Holy Nation.
Christina Solara.
Although much bigger than normal, the vent was still quite tight for too many people, and I was having difficulty carrying the slime girl. Thwack! Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of those guards hitting against the ice wall. It wasn't going to break that easily. I made sure to strengthen its fortitude. I brought a few potions, but they shouldn't do much help to my condition. Still, I ended up taking one of them, driving the liquid of the container to my throat.
Ugh.
A bland taste as always. This past body consumed a lot of potions since he always ended up getting injured one way or another. His training was hellish, and due to this care for his classmates, he ended up in a lot of trouble, especially against demon beasts. So, he would get a lot of injuries, and now I'm pretty much addicted to potions. As I kept crawling forward, the vent sloped downward suddenly, and I lost my grip for a moment, sliding a short distance before stopping myself with my foot. Clang! The sound echoed loudly and I froze.
Shit.
I held my breath, straining to hear any noise behind me. But all I could hear was the faint hum of the machinery from the lab and the distant dripping of water. No one was following me yet. Eventually, I reached a junction where the vent split into 3 paths. Great!
I took a look at each other.
None of them had any clear markings, and the dim light made it nearly impossible to tell where they led. If only the author described this a bit more. Instead, I closed my eyes and tried to feel the vibrations of the air. It was the only thing I could really do in this kind of situation.
Left.
The left path had a slight draft, a subtle pull of air that insinuated an opening. It wasn't much, but it was my best shot yet. I entered the left part, dragging myself through the narrow space. The vent grew colder as I moved, and the sound of rushing water became louder. Must be near the sewers again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw a faint light ahead. A broken grate let in a soft, pale glow, probably due to the moonlight.
Almost there.
I reached the grate and then pushed it slightly. It wouldn't budge at all. So, I gathered mana in the palm of my hand. Crack! The grate broke loose, falling with a dull sound onto the ground below. Cool, damp air rushed in, and I leaned out, looking at where I ended up. A large drainage tunnel stretched out in front of me, water running constantly along the bottom. The smell was awful, but it smelled like freedom. Carefully, I lowered myself down, landing with a splash in the shallow water before then looking around. The tunnel was sparsely lit by some weak, flickering lights up along the ceiling. It was silent, except for the gentle rush of water. I began walking, each step creating ripples in the dirty water. Thankfully, after just a minute or so, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. A rusted ladder led up to a hatch near the ceiling.
Finally.
I approached the ladder, shifting the slime girl in my arms once more. Climbing with one arm wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't have a choice. Taking a deep breath, I reached for the ladder and started climbing as my muscles tensed up with every small movement. It hurts, damn it. I don't usually groan in pain and things like that because of my calm mind talent, however, it still hurts a lot. It just means that I have a high pain tolerance. Gurgly. After a few moments, I reached the top, and then I braced myself against the hatch and pushed.
Creak.
The hatch opened, and the night sky above greeted me. Cool, fresh air rushed in, washing away the stench of the sewers. I climbed out, pulling the slime girl with me. We were in an alley with tall buildings of the capital rising on either side. The streets were silent, only the hum of the city life came from some faraway distance. I leaned against the wall, getting my breath back. My ribs hurt, my whole body was smeared with mud, and I was sure I looked like hell.
But we were safe. For the time being.
I looked down at the slime girl in my arms. Her breath was steady as her chest rose up and down, but then, her eyelids quivered slightly. Her green eyes flickered open briefly, meeting mine before closing again. What was that? I felt her arms suddenly enveloping my head more intimately, and then, her body size suddenly decreased until she was the size of my hand. Maybe even smaller than that. She opened her eyes once again and jumped to the small pocket on my shirt, peeking her head out. And then closed her eyes once again. Weird. I have to go back to the hotel, I'll need a long shower. The room was dark and elegant, almost like a private club. Black velvet coated the walls, while golden lights hanging from the ceiling gave everything a warm, rich glow. A soft jazz tune played in the background, filling the air with a quiet rhythm. There, Yara Devereux sat in the middle on a sleek leather sofa, her face impassive and cold, her dark eyes impassive as she swirled the glass of red wine in her hand. The deep color of the wine seemed almost bloody, like the scarlet of her lips, and gave her a beautiful yet dangerous air. Creak. The door in front of her opened slightly, and one of her subordinates stepped inside. He was visibly nervous, fidgeting his hands as he stood before her. "Miss Devereux," he began with a quivering voice. "There's been some sort of situation at the Ravenholm laboratory." Yara raised her eyebrow with a cold gaze.
Go on.
The underling shifted uneasily. There was an intruder who got in earlier tonight. He killed Dr. Estermont and some of the guards. Not just killed, tore through them like they were nothing. Reports say he used some sort of ice-based ability. It was fast, brutal. Yara set her wine glass down on the table in front of her, the sound of the glass meeting would echoing in the room.
"And the prototype?" she asked sharply.
"It's gone. He left with the slime girl." The room fell silent as Yara leaned back, placing her fingertips on the arm of the sofa. Her face didn't change, but the weight of silence in the room took a darker turn. "And the guards?" she finally asked. The underling hesitated, then answered. "The intruder fought alone, Miss Devereux. He handled all the guards himself, even while protecting the slime girl. Witnesses say he took down several B-rank fighters without much trouble. Dr. Estermont didn't stand a chance. Yara's eyes narrowed slightly, but her face remained calm. How did he manage to escape? The underling's hands clenched nervously. He found the hidden vent system beneath the capsules. He used ice to block the others off and disappeared into the sewer system. We're tracking him now, but he's slippery.
Skilled.
Yara didn't reply immediately. Her lips curved slightly as she picked up her glass again, her red nails lightly tapping the stem. And the cameras? She asked, her voice soft yet laced with such weight that it sent a shiver down the man's spine. We're reviewing the footage now. We should have something soon, he stuttered, his head bowed.
Good.
Bring it to me as soon as it's ready. Yes, Miss Devereux, the man quickly replied before practically running out, closing the door behind him. With him gone, Yara sat still, the glass in her hand as if lost in thought. Something sharp, something dangerous glinted in her eyes. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't warm, it was sharp and deadly, like the edge of a dagger. Her fingers tightened around the glass. Crack! The wine glass shattered in her hand, shards tumbling to the floor, droplets of wine staining the expensive rug. She didn't seem to care. Her smile widened just a little as she muttered under her breath. Interesting. Ah. So refreshing. I exhaled, pushing my back against the cold wall of the shower. The steam rose around me, softening the bruises and cuts I had earned from tonight's fight. I drank a few more potions to ease the pain, so it didn't hurt as much. But, now I have a small problem. The slime girl. What was I supposed to do with her? I only saved her on a whim because I really didn't want her to die or anything. And now she was my responsibility? That wasn't exactly my area of expertise. What a mess. I rubbed a hand over my face, groaning softly. After a while, the water began to cool down, so I drained the tub and stepped out, grabbing a towel to dry off. I put on a loose shirt and pants before leaving the bathroom. And there she was. The slime girl. The slime girl was standing by the window, wearing one of my white shirts and a pair of old pants I'd left for her. The shirt was far too big for her small frame, hanging loosely over her slimy body. She was staring at me. Not blinking, not moving, just staring. Her green eyes were wide, shimmering slightly in the dim light of the room. Ah. I really didn't know what to say, especially since she didn't say a word when we got back to my hotel room. She just stood still, and after I said to her to take a bath, she only tilted her head. Like she was doing right now. The slime girl didn't reply. Instead, she only tilted her head to the right and kept watching me with that same wide yet curious look. I ran a hand through my hair and then sighed. Look, I don't know if you can even understand me, but you're safe now. Okay? No one's going to hurt you. Her head tilted the other way, and for a moment, I thought I saw the corners of her mouth twitch upward, almost like a faint smile. Was she smiling? I wasn't entirely sure. Great. I muttered under my breath, collapsing onto the bed. Guess I've got a roommate now. She didn't seem to mind the sarcasm, or maybe she didn't understand it. Either way, she turned her gaze back to the window, watching the city lights with that same quiet curiosity. I leaned down against the comfy bed, staring at the ceiling. Let's just hope everything goes right. I closed my eyes, drifting to sleep. The room was quiet. The only thing that could be heard was Estria's steady breathing as he slept without any worries in the world. His chest moved up and down, relaxed. The dim light from the window lit the room just enough to make everything visible. And next to the window, stood the slime girl, with her green shimmering eyes focused on Estria's figure. At first, her face looked curious and blank like before. But then, swip. Her green color started to shift, turning into a deep pink, and her body glowed slightly in the light while her cyan hair turned into a deeper shade of purple. Her lips curved into a small, mischievous smile. She stepped closer to Estria, her purple hair like slime flowed behind her, and her shimmering form moved with an odd grace. Stopping beside the bed, she crouched slightly, her head tilting as she looked at Estria's sleeping face. He looked peaceful, even if his face still wore its usual calm and motionless look. A small giggle slipped from her lips as she reached out with one slimy finger, tracing lightly along the edge of his jawline. Drip, drip. A faint sound came as a few drops of her slime fell to the floor. She didn't seem to notice, as her attention was completely drawn to him. Her hand slid down to his arm with a cool and light touch, leaving a faint trail of pink residue. She leaned in closer with her face hanging just above his. The mischievous smile on her face grew wider as she tilted her head. Then, without a word, she pressed her soft, slime-like lips against his cheek. Squelch. The faint, wet sound was barely audible as she pulled away, giggling quietly to herself again. Estria stirred slightly but didn't wake. The slime girl tilted her head again, her pink eyes gleaming in the dim light. She leaned back, one finger pressed to her lips like she was savoring the moment. Then, as if satisfied, she stood up and turned back to the window, watching the city lights once more with that same strange smile on her face. Gradually, her pink skin transformed back to green, while her head changed to the cyan color it had been before.
Drip. Ugh, it's hot.
Murmuring uncomfortably, I slowly opened my eyes. I thought the rooms had a cooling system. Why is it so hot? At first, I couldn't tell what was happening, but then I felt it, a small weight on my chest.
God damn it.
The slime girl was sprawled across me, her small, slimy body rising and falling in sync with her calm breathing. Her head rested against my chest, and her green hair glowed faintly in the sunlight peeking through the curtains. Did she climb up here while I was sleeping? I muttered before shifting slightly. However, her grip seemed to have tightened as she murmured something incomprehensible, snuggling closer.
My entire body tensed.
Her cool skin was oddly soothing, but this situation was far from normal.
Oi! I muttered. Wake up. No response.
I tried to move her off gently, but she held on like a clingy child. Her arms, or rather, her slimy extensions, wrapped around me in a way that made escape feel impossible without force. Great, just great. I furrowed my eyebrows. Her face shifted slightly, and for a second, I thought she was waking up. Finally. Instead, she let out a small hum, her lips curving into a faint smile, completely unaware of how awkward this was for me.
Damn it.
Without any choice, I simply stood up and shifted her body to get her to hang on my back, and to my surprise, her legs immediately wrapped around my waist.
Ack. My ribs still hurt.
I should go and meet the Saintess. This broken rib is still a deep problem even if it is sustainable with mana. After all, I got lucky to be able to meet the Saintess. Normally, the Saintess is deported to the strongest academy since there are located the most talented students, and their chances of getting injured are high. But because of my highly dangerous actions and achievements, our academy was the one that had received the Saintess. Which was useful. I would visit her 3 to 2 times a week because I ended up getting in trouble a lot. And it means a lot. From killing high-ranking demon beasts to fighting against an order of assassins. It was simply hell. It's just unfortunate that the Saintess is going to Eternum's Royal Academy after the competition, even if I win or not. That was because of the 177th Hunting Festival of the Eternum's Royal Academy, which was happening a month or 2 after the competition. I didn't end up getting up to that part of the novel. Unfortunately. Putting those thoughts aside, I did my morning routine. But now, how am I supposed to go out with her clinging to me? I turned to the slime girl who was now hugging from the front. Her eyes opened slightly before they got the same wide look from before. And of course, she tilted her head to the right. Sigh. What am I going to do with you? I let out a deep sigh.
Estria.
Do you want to go around the capital with us? One of my classmates called out, their eyes bright with excitement. I shook my head. Sorry, I'm busy today. Maybe next time. Their expressions fell, and they exchanged glances before sighing. All right, see you later then. We're gonna miss you. One added dramatically, waving a hand. Yeah, it's not like I'm going on a long trip or anything. I sighed. Before meeting up with them earlier, I'd already dealt with enough for one day, specifically trying to peel that slime girl off of me. She'd been clinging on since the morning, and somehow, I'd managed to convince her to stay put in the room before sneaking out. Anyway, I had plans for today. I needed to pick up some things at the capital. Merchant Street was my main destination, famous for its fair pricing system where everything was sold at a performance-to-price ratio. A perfect spot to get supplies. So, everything got the perfect price for their use. But more importantly, I had to meet someone today.
The Saintess.
If I'm not wrong, she should be at the Cat 8 Hedral right now, so I should pass by it later.
Estria.
A soft voice suddenly reached out to me. I turned around to see Vivian, one of my teachers. Do you have time? Her lips curled up as she said so, giving me a small smile. I should have some time. I was planning to head to Merchant Street, but sure. What's up? Well. She paused, looking almost sheepish as she scratched her cheek. First, I want to apologize in advance. She began, bowing slightly. For what? You've been selected as our exchange student. After the competition, you'll be attending Eternum's Royal Academy for a semester. For a minute I thought I heard wrong. Did she really say that I was the exchange student? I mean, I'm the one who usually keeps the peace within our academy so that no other outside students threaten any of the students. And she really said that I'm the exchange student this time? I must be dreaming. Can you repeat that, please?
Ah.
As if expecting my reaction, she let out a sigh before parting her lips. You've been chosen as the exchange student. She repeated, her smile faltering slightly.
Me? An exchange student?
You're serious? Vivian nodded at my words. She really doesn't seem to be joking. After that interaction. Ugh, just my luck. This is the last thing I wanted to happen. I said so, running a hand through my silky hair. Not that it helped my mood. Normally, being chosen to attend the most prestigious academy would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Any student would kill for this chance.
But for me, this is a huge problem.
That academy is a demon-attracting rat. Every week there's going to be at least one demon attack, not to mention that the whole plot of the novel revolves around it. Catastrophes are happening because of the protagonist. Damn it. My idea of getting my academy into a higher rank so I could get a higher ranking job didn't work that well. Estria's wish and mine were pretty much on the same path. He wanted to make his academy shine and get to the higher ranks so he could get the recognition he always wanted, and I just wanted to live a leisurely life. And for that same leisure life, I didn't give a single fuck about the plot, and if I needed to ruin to live a relaxed life, I would do so. It seems that the competition isn't the only thing I'm going to prepare for. I muttered, and at the same time, I had finally reached the Merchant Street. The place was packed with people, shoppers and vendors all shouting over each other. The smell of fresh bread, grilled meat, and a faint tinge of magic filled the air. Every stall was stacked with colorful goods, enchanted tools, rare herbs, shiny trinkets, you name it, they had it. But amongst all of them, one stood out the most, just like a king among peasants. There, a giant queue of people stretched out the front, all waiting their turn to enter. Luxurious Commerce. The store of the most prestigious merchant family, Luxuria. Just by the name, it already sounds extremely extravagant, and it isn't exaggerated, since it was mentioned in the novel that their wealth is superior to the royal family. Crazy, isn't it? And of course, the heiress of this business is none other than Violet von Luxuria.
A heroine.
Well, not really.
She is a heroine, but also isn't.
She was one of the final villainesses which were mentioned by the novel's author, but he also said that she was also one of the hidden heroines. A character that could potentially be seen as a heroine in the side stories. She's the last person I want to interact with. Shooking my head, I passed right in front of the big shop and started walking around the Merchant Street. There were plenty of other shops to visit. And I had a long list of things to buy. That alone took me a few hours. Ah, a spatial pouch is so useful. I sighed with a smile. Nothing could be more useful than this little thing. So, after a while, I reached the cathedral.
It's huge.
Its spires shot up into the sky like giant spears, their tips catching the sunlight and glowing faintly. The walls were made of smooth white stone, covered in intricate carvings of battles and blessings. Stained glass windows lined the sides, each one was a masterpiece showing pictures of the many saints that once were alive. The entrance was grand, a pair of tall, golden doors wide open, welcoming visitors. A steady flow of priests and priestesses in white robes moved in and out, keeping a quiet atmosphere. When I stepped inside, the cool air hit me, calming and refreshing at the same time. Rows of polished wooden pews stretched towards the altar, which sat bathed in golden light. Above the altar was the largest stained glass window I had ever seen. It showed the figure of a very beautiful lady with golden locks and golden eyes. Behind her, for wings stretched out giving her an ethereal grace. Our heavenly God. It was truly beautiful. The cathedral of the capital. And somewhere inside was the saintess.
Christina Solin. The one I needed to meet.
But where is she? Before, she told me she was going to be at the cathedral, but where exactly? With a sigh, I turned toward the nearest hallway, prepared to start a tedious search. But just as I took a step, I felt a hand grip my shoulder.
Ah, John.
I exclaimed in surprise, turning around to see a familiar face. Yo. He smiled in response. This man right here was the bodyguard of the saintess and a very skilled swordsman who could probably kill me with a single swing of his sword. Hee, you really came here as the saintess mentioned. He chuckled, before then starting at my body from below to above. Let me guess, broken leg?
No, maybe an arm?
Or could it be rib, a broken rib?
I shortcut his response.
In response, John's grin widened, clearly amused. I know you can easily see my injuries, why pretend not to know?
It's just fun.
He shrugged his shoulders, before then walking away and uttering to me, "Follow me, I'll guide you to the Saintess." I nodded and started following him. We climbed a few stairs before T8 Hen reaching a hall that led to a single room. John stopped, placed a hand on the door, and glanced back at me with a wry smile.
Good luck.
He smiled wryly before closing the door. And before I could respond, he shoved me inside. The door clicked shut behind me.
This fuck.
What did I say about cursing? A familiar voice that had the tone of a seductress reached out to my ears, cutting off my words. My hand instinctively reached for the door handle.
Locked. Of course. Damn it. I turned around. And there she was. Christina Solin.
A tumble of gold, her hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall, glimmering faintly in the soft light streaming through colored glass panes. Her pink eyes locked onto mine, full of amusement and something unreadable. She was in a bright, snowy white dress that clung to her form with golden patterns embroidered upon it and slightly glowing. The fall of the material was beautiful, but this was a poor camouflage for the utterly sensual form of her body. Her arms held the dress up just so, taut over her generous curves. It was almost ironic. For a person with the title Saintess, her body was anything but saintly. It seems that you got injured again. Her lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile as she took a single step forward. I stiffened as her eyes narrowed, gleaming with a sharper edge than before. "What's this, Brother Estria?" she continued, her voice dropping just slightly. The way she said my name felt heavier, like the weight of a dagger next to my neck. "If I recall correctly." Christina's smile widened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "This is the 91st time this month, isn't it?"
Her voice was calm, too calm.
The air in the room seemed to grow heavier as she tilted her head slightly, her golden hair cascading like liquid sunlight. Her eyes narrowed, and that smile somehow grew even more unsettling.
"Rip. Fuck. No cursing."
Ripping the dead skin from my body, the Saintess interrupted my words by putting her hand in my mouth, making sure no sound got out. "Who told you to get injured?" Her tone was soft, almost sweet, but her pink eyes glinted with something far less forgiving. I winced as she dabbed a cold cream onto the raw patch of my back. "Well, there was a special situation." "Like what?"
Her words came out sharp. I kept silent.
If I told her I had infiltrated the black market, taken on a group of B-level rankers solo, and barely escaped with my life just to get a weapon, she'd probably strangle me with her bare hands.
"Oh." She let out a heavy sigh.
"What am I supposed to do with you?" Her fingers moved away, and she handed me my shirt without another word. I slipped it on quickly, hoping to avoid further lectures. But when I turned back to her, she was staring at me. Her dim pink eyes locked onto mine. The intensity was so high that it made a chill run down my spine.
"Who did you save?"
Her voice was low, but there was something in her question heavier than the air in the room.
I froze.
Of all the questions she could have asked me, this wasn't one I was expecting. Lying to Christina wasn't an option, she always saw through it. But telling her the truth? That felt even riskier. Deviants were a race that was truly hated by the holy nation. They were essentially a race that was created by the mass reproduction of demons, beasts, and actual demons or demonesses. For the holy nation, they truly deserved to die. Her pink eyes didn't waver, and her expression softened slightly, though it did nothing to ease the tension. It was that kind of soft that said, "I'll be patient for now, but you'd better not test me." Just someone who needed help. Truly, I didn't actually mean to save her since I only wanted the weapon. But of course, I wouldn't let her die.
"Someone?" She repeated my words.
Her scent, soft and floral with a hint of something warm and intoxicating, wrapped around me. I was already used to it, so it didn't affect me much, but for others, it might be quite deadly.
"Was it a woman?"
Her pink eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and though her lips carried the faintest hint of a smile, her tone was still quite sharp. "Why does that matter?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned forward, just enough for her golden hair to spill over her shoulders. Her intoxicating scent grew stronger, wrapping around me like a warm, suffocating blanket. "Just curious. After all, in most the cases when you saved someone, at least 90% of them were women."
"Ah.
So, it really was a woman, huh?" Her lips seemed to have widened as she gauged my reaction. "It wasn't like that. Besides, I save mostly women because they usually get harassed by some dumb heir of a prestigious family."
"So?"
She took a step forward, making me take a step back. "It's their business, why do you have to chime in?"
"I mean." Her voice turned sharper.
I don't get it. I tried to take another step back, but the wall behind me put an end to that idea. Her gaze pinned me in place, and I could feel another chill running down my back. Can't you simply not help them? And stop being so selfless?
I'm not selfless. Well, this body might be, but I'm not.
For a moment, we stood there, looking at each other. Her fingers tapped lightly against her arm as she stared at me, and then with a soft sigh, she leaned back, giving me some much-needed space.
I'm done with you, she sighed.
Immediately, I took the opportunity to go towards the exit. But before leaving, I couldn't help but glance at her. She gazed out the window, the light from the stained glass cast colorful patterns across her figure, making her look almost ethereal.
And Estria?
Her voice made my steps halt.
Yeah?
Her voice was soft, almost too soft. Next time, try not to get yourself killed. It would be inconvenient. The way she said inconvenient sent a shiver down my spine.
Noted.
I would simply go to a priest next time. Although their powers aren't as good as the Saintess, they at least can help me for a fair price. Thinking about it, if I needed to actually pay for the Saintess's services, how much debt would I have? Probably in tens of thousands.
Gosh.
I'm so lucky that I can use her services without paying. Then Christina turned back to me, her smile back to its usual serene self, though her eyes still held that unsettling glint.
Good. Now go on.
I'm sure you have things to do. She didn't have to tell me twice. I twisted the knob of the door and got out of that room. Being alone with the Saintess is much scarier than anything else.
Yo. How did it go?
John, who was waiting at the door, turned to me with a small smile. I'm never coming back to meet her. That bad? He raised an eyebrow in surprise. It wasn't that bad, just your usual scary Saintess. When I'm alone with her, she always sounds scarier than normal. However, I probably won't be seeing her as much, since I now live with a deviant. And even though the holy nation can't exactly kill them, it's better to hide the slime girl from the Saintess. If she finds out, I could get in trouble. For that reason, I'll need to meet the Saintess fewer times than normal. I only went to the Saintess because her services were free, and her power was stronger than the priest. But I have quite a hefty amount of money, so I'll use it for the priests. I can't risk the opportunity of her getting to see that slime girl. I'm kidding, obviously.
MHM.
He nodded, taking a deep look at me. Anyway, you know she cares about you, right?
I blinked at him, caught off guard. What? The Saintess.
He replied with a small smile. She cares for you more than you think. Before I could respond, he gave me a small nod and walked off, leaving me standing there, staring after him. She cares about me? That is quite obvious considering her reaction when I get injured. However, the way he said it feels like
she likes me. Whatever.
I left the cathedral and decided to go around the capital for a bit more. I really wanted to check the training range that was so popular around here. After all, instead of implementing a training zone for the Royal Academy, they decided to create a public one so they could maximize profits. This proposal was also made by Violet when she was a child. As a kid, she proposed making the training ground public to generate revenue for the kingdom, and it worked. Now, people from all over come here to hone their skills or show off. So yeah, this training zone was a huge success and anyone can pay to enter while students from the Royal Academy use their students' points. When I arrived, the training range was as busy as I'd expected. Rows of targets, dummy stations, sparring areas, it was packed with people of all skill levels. The clashing of swords, the sounds of arrows hitting targets, and the occasional boom of magic spells filled the air. I made my way to the shooting section. Unlike the more crowded areas, this one had fewer people. Guns weren't as popular in the world as they were considered useless because no one could actually create a gun artifact. They could create it,
but it would be a pretty hefty amount.
After all, a gun has too many components, and they need bullets to work. So, who would spend items that could create a powerful sword to create bullets or one of the few components of the gun? So yeah, the choice was always traditional weapons or a wand for magic. The clerk at the counter looked up as I approached.
A rental gun? She asked. Personal.
How long do you plan to train? An hour for now, might stay longer. 10 silvers. Hearing her words, I handed over the coins. Lane 4. She added, pointing towards the lane I was supposed to enter. I walked forward and then pulled the morph weapon, which was now similar to a modified Desert Eagle. Then, I reached out to the difficulty meter and put expert mode for handguns. And also tapped on the magic bullet options, which made the targets gain a magic field around them. They were set up about 2 meters apart from each other, and one 20 meters away from me, standard for expert mode. Of course, this was just aim training. I didn't want to spend more money for a simulation or advanced technology since I still had a few things in store to buy. And I might buy an artifact, so I don't really know how much I'll spend. Alright, let's warm up. I raised the gun.
Bang.
The first shot hit the outer ring of the target.
Not too bad.
And I thought. I have infinite bullets. I smiled deeply. With this morph weapon, I didn't have to worry about running out of ammo. Each shot fired from the gun drained a bit of my mana, but since the weapon was crafted as a whole artifact, it automatically reloaded itself when I reverted it to its original form. The bullets weren't just regular ones either, they matched the weapon's quality, a high-grade artifact. I almost forgot that this weapon is a high-grade artifact. That means I can make a blood contract with it. Biting my finger, I let a drop of blood fall into the gun. As soon as it made contact, the weapon glowed with an intense red light. The glow spread quickly, wrapping around the gun before it vanished entirely. I glanced at my left hand, where a faint warmth lingered. A tattoo of a ring had appeared on my index finger.
Perfect.
I grinned, channeling a bit of mana into the tattoo. The gun materialized in my hand instantly, feeling even more natural now, as if it had become a part of me. With this blood contract, even if someone tried to take it away from me, I could simply summon it back to me. Now all I needed to do was train for the Academy's competition. I aimed the gun ahead, ready to start training again. It's not like there's going to be a random demon beast attack while I'm here, right? I muttered to myself. I'll just train peacefully. The words had barely left my mouth when the ground shook beneath me.
Boom.
A deafening roar echoed across the training zone, deep and guttural, vibrating through the air like thunder.
Of course.
I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose as another roar shattered the stillness. From the distance, I heard someone yell.
It's a bulking demon. A named demon beast.
Everyone, evacuate.
Bulking demon.
A beast so infamous even its name sent chills down people's spines. I glanced at the gun in my hand, its faint red glow still present.
Peaceful training, huh?
I muttered to myself before stepping toward the sound. Just like every living being, demon beasts had their own ranks. But compared to humans, they were absolute monsters, 3 to 5 times stronger at the same rank. They're divided into a few ranks ranging from low-level demon beasts to catastrophe-level demon beasts. The low-level demon beasts are equivalent to the F and E rank, the intermediate ones to C and D rank, while the high-level ones are equal to the A and B rank. And then, there were the named demon beasts, S-rank monsters. These creatures were rare, intelligent, and devastatingly powerful. From S to S+, each could obliterate entire towns if left unchecked. As for the last two, they're pretty much extinct since there hasn't been a single one of those for hundreds of years. But they potentially reach the SS and SSS levels. Of course, there are very few humans at that level, but if one appear, it would probably lead to world destruction. Because demon beasts are normally 3 to 5 times stronger than the human's rank. As for the bulking demon that had just interrupted Estria's training, a strong S-rank demon beast.
Phew.
Whistling, Estria looked at the bulking demon as he threw his gun in the air. The ground cracked as the demon's hulking form appeared in his view, standing over 4 meters tall. Its muscles rippled beneath obsidian-black skin, eyes glowing a malevolent red similar to Estria's eyes. A pair of jagged horns twisted upward like cruel weapons, and its claws looked sharp enough to slice through steel.
Boom.
The beast slammed a massive fist into the ground, sending tremors that knocked several people off their feet. On his back, 2 giant axes could be seen, each one as sharp as a high-quality sword. All right, big guy. He raised his gun and then fired.
Bang.
The shot rang out, slamming into the demon's shoulder, leaving a small hole in its skin. The monster roared in pain, but it didn't stumble or slow down. Instead, it let out another loud growl and started rushing towards Esther with its horns pointed at him.
Bang.
Another bullet struck the demon's side, and a small chunk of the monster's flesh was torn away.
Too little damage.
This is going to be a problem. Estria muttered to himself, jumping back and getting on top of one random monument. The bulking demon was smart though. As Estria shot one more time, the demon actually dodged the bullet and continued on its way towards him. Not today. The bullet that came next wasn't just a regular shot. A faint blue glow surrounded the projectile as it fired toward the beast. Magic ice bullet, gunslinger ice magic. The bullet streaked toward the beast and hit it squarely in the leg. The effect was immediate. A burst of freezing energy erupted on impact, forming jagged patches of ice that spread across the demon's limb.
Kurak!
The bulking demon roared again, this time in frustration, as its body struggled against the sudden cold gripping its muscles.
Oh!
Estrella raised an eyebrow.
Your weakness is ice, huh? Lucky.
His gun morphed effortlessly into the shape of a Tachi sword in his hand. Estrella's hands moved as he swung the sword in the air, casting a wave of ice magic in the direction of the beast. The frost glimmered under the pale light as it streaked forward, creating a crescent-shaped wave of ice. Moonlit Ice Lotus Art. Second move. Moonlit Frost Barrage. The barrage of crescent-shaped waves of silver energy cut through the air and collided with the demon's left arm, sending it skidding back slightly. The bulking demon growled, its fury growing with each passing second, but Estrella could see the effects of his attack. Ice was forming over the demon's limbs, slowing its movements just slightly. But even so, Estrella didn't waste any more time. He quickly morphed his sword back into a gun and pointed at the demon. Bang! Another shot rang out, hitting the demon squarely in the shoulder. He shifted into a crouch, shooting again and again, the sound of his gun ringing louder with each shot. The bulking demon staggered but was still very much alive. He roared again, pushing forward, not willing to retreat. And as the demon advanced, Estrella also retracted a few steps. His skin is too hard for me to be able to cut through it. And if I use one of the advanced uses of my sword art, I might lose an arm. I can't risk it. The only thing I can do is to save as much time as possible. Bang! Another shot rang out. However, the bulking demon seemed to have gotten used to the pain, and slowly, his speed started increasing. Seeing this, Estrella raised his left hand while still shooting at the demon. Slowly, an ice liquid formed and it transformed into a magic circle that had exactly 3 stars, forming a triangle. Ice Series, Frost Explosion, 3rd level spell. A small liquid was thrown against the bulking demon. It didn't look too much, but it suddenly increased in speed and got the shape of an arrow. Boom! As soon as it touched the bulking demon's skin, it exploded, freezing everything around in a range of 10 meters. Estrella stopped shooting bullets. After all, this was just a spell to save more time while he waited for reinforcements to arrive. He couldn't kill this demon beast alone. Crack! The frozen statue of the bulking demon started showing cracks, and in just a few more seconds, it completely cracked. Karaaf! The demon beast roared and then dashed forward at an incredible speed. He pulled its massive double axes from its back in a single motion. The sound of steel scraping leather filled the air as the monster dashed toward Estrella at full speed. Fuck! Estrella's eyes widened in surprise. He raised his gun as quickly as possible and shot it. Magic Ice Bullet, Gunslinger Ice Magic. However, the demon dodged his bullet as it charged like a freight train, its massive body moving with surprising speed. Estrella didn't have much time to react, so he leaped high into the air, attempting to avoid its path. But it wasn't enough. Before Estrella could react fully, the bulking demon slammed its body into the ground with devastating force. The collision sent a powerful shockwave through the air. Estrella was sent flying backward, thrown through the air with tremendous force. Estrella gasped as his body was flung toward a nearby building. Ah! The building came into view as he hurtled toward it, and he braced himself for impact. Crash! The sound was loud as Estrella slammed into the side of the building. Bricks crumbled beneath his weight, the structure groaning as it held under the force of his impact. Pain shot through Estrella's body as his head hit the ground. He had broken quite a few bones. He coughed weakly, the sharp taste of blood filling his mouth. His body hurt from the impact, every bone feeling like it was on fire. Fuck! It seems that I'll need to meet the Saintess again. The words barely left his lips as he coughed, his vision swimming. Blood trickled from his mouth as he lay there, broken, battered, and gasping for breath. The last thing he thought before his vision started to blur was how much trouble he was going to have after this. Well, damn. Lucas's POV. I could feel the tension in the air as our group arrived at the scene. We had been rushing here the moment word got to us about a named demon beast, an S-rank bulking demon, no less, attacking the capital. Damn it. Why did the notification of the system arrive so late? I gritted my teeth. And then as I looked around, I was quite surprised. There were no signs of blood anywhere. It seems that everyone evacuated safely. But how? Let's go further. I spoke to my group. They were none other than Ella, Maya, Rose, and Iris. Ella was our swordsman, Rose our mage, Maya was the physical attacker, and finally, Iris was our priest who would heal our injuries. With me as their leader and main attacker, we could potentially kill this demon beast. However, as I reached the true battle scene, my heart sank. We found ourselves at the edge of a broken section of what looked like a residential district, the buildings shattered and broken as though some massive force had torn through them. There was snow and ice on the ground, frost-covered debris scattered everywhere. The moonlight shimmered ominously over all of it, giving the scene an ethereal glow. And at the center of the destruction? The giant form of the bulking demon. The demon was massive, its black skin glistening under the pale moonlight as it roared toward the sky, holding sharp axes in its hands. I could already feel the sheer power radiating from its body. It truly deserved to be a named demon beast. But then, I quickly noticed a few injuries on his body, and some of them were actually pretty deep. It was at that same time, I heard a familiar voice.
Damn it.
Fucking bull.
He cursed in an annoyed voice. Estria?
Ella uttered as soon as she saw his figure, her face contorted in worry as she quickly started approaching him. It's time for round 2. He gave the bulking demon a bloodied smile, despite being bruised, having a few broken bones, and, by the looks of it, heavily injured. He had his weapon in his hand and kept a faint yet small smile against the bulking demon. His red eyes glowed in a terrific way as they held the silhouette of a moon.
Damn. He looks so cool.
Iris muttered. At that moment, even my pride couldn't deny it.
He looked damn cool. Ella, wait.
I called out, watching her sprint toward Estria without hesitation. That demon's still active. Ella slowed down her steps, having her sword in a defensive grip. Worry was written all over her face, her knuckles white from gripping her blade so tightly.
You idiot.
What were you thinking, taking on a named demon beast alone? Estria, leaning against a crumbling wall, raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, but his red eyes held that same calm glow. What a surprise, princess. Ella's lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't even blush at the nickname this time. Besides, Estria continued, wiping blood from his chin with the back of his hand. I was just buying time. The royal guards should be on their way, right? He glanced at Ella, then at the rest of us, his gaze lingering briefly before narrowing slightly. And, it seems you have a whole party made to hunt the demon, huh? Exactly. Ella nodded, stepping closer to him. Her voice softened ever slightly as their eyes met. So let us handle this. Stay down, Iris will heal you. She turned to the demon beast, gripping her sword tightly as she issued orders. Iris, heal him now. Everyone else get ready. Iris, the team's priest, nodded and rushed forward. Her staff began to glow with a soft, golden light as she chanted a healing spell.
Hang on, Estria.
This might sting a little. However, upon hearing her words, Estria frowned as his eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? I never met any of you.
What?
Rose stammered upon hearing his words. After all, except for the demon hunter and the moonlight swordsman, who was Estria, they were the most popular characters on the student news. But, Iris still didn't reply to Estria's question. The corner of Estria's mouth twitched upward, but he said nothing more.
Thanks.
As soon as the light on Estria's body diminished, he thanked Iris with a small smile. At this time, everyone was ready, so it was time to attack the demon beast.
Kura.
The bulking demon roared, slamming its axes into the ground and creating a shockwave that shook the area. Debris flew everywhere, forcing us to shield ourselves. All right. Everyone takes their positions in the formation.
Ella, take the lead.
Rose, focus your magic on slowing it down and dealing burn damage. Maya, stay mobile and look for openings. Iris, keep healing. I'll take the front with Ella. Everyone nodded, moving into their positions while Estria only looked at us with seeming interest. Looking his murderous gaze onto us, the bulking demon roared again, charging toward us with surprising speed for its size. Clang. Ella and I met it head-on, our weapons clashing against each one its massive axes. Sparks flew as the sound of metal meeting metal echoed through the battlefield.
Rose. I shouted. Got it.
Rose's hands glowed with fiery energy as she cast her spell. Blazing chains, 4th level fire magic. Flaming chains shot up from the ground, wrapping around the demon's limbs. It struggled against them, but the flame chains held them firm, at least for now. Maya, go.
Ella shouted.
Maya dashed in, her movements a blur as she landed a powerful punch against the demon's side. The impact echoed like a cannon blast, and the demon staggered back slightly. Bang! A bullet suddenly rang out and hit the demon square in the chest, leaving a frosty patch where it struck.
Not shabby.
I turned back and saw Estrella holding a gun with a calm expression. A faint smoke came out of the gun, meaning that he had been the one who had shot the bullet. If he wants to help, that's great. I can't reveal much of my power here. But suddenly, the demon roared again, this time shaking off the fiery chains. Despite its size, it moved with surprising speed, swinging one of its axes wide, catching Maya mid-dash and sending her flying into the rubble.
Bam. Kook. Maya.
Iris, go help her. Iris nodded, rushing to our fallen teammate while Ella and I pressed the attack that I ordered before turning towards the bulking demon who was fighting against Ella alone. They exchanged blows and Ella was successfully getting small cuts on its body. Seeing that opportunity, I leaped into the air and warned Ella.
Ella, dodge.
Immediately, Ella jumped to the right side, giving me a full view of the bulking demon. Demon slaying sword art.
Corrupted sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship. A black flame engulfed my weapon as I slashed downward with all my might.
Clang.
My sword clashed against its axis, the sheer force sending tremors through my arms. I increased my strength and successfully won the contest, making the demon beast lose his composure. So, I took the opportunity and swung my sword again directly at his right arm.
Splurt.
The blade made a clean cut, snapping off his right arm and leaving a fountain of disgusting black blood behind.
Ella.
Upon hearing my voice, Ella appeared in the sky as her sword gained a golden aura and it increased in size. The royal swordsmanship.
Truly beautiful.
Royal swordsmanship, heavenly strike, SS-level techniques.
Swing.
A blade of energy was sent downward, carving through the ground until it eventually reached the demon beast. However, before it could meet the demon beast's body,
Kuraag.
A malicious purple aura came out of the bulking demon's body. Dark Order. Gritting my teeth, I rushed towards the bulking demon, not giving a single fuck about what would happen.
Corrupted sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship. Die, you damned beast.
Swing.
A barrage of energy was created as my sword met the intense purple aura.
Bam. Caw.
The aftermath caused an explosion of energy to send me flying.
Aak. Crumble.
The shockwave sent both me and Ella crashing into a nearby building, the structure crumbling around us. The building snapped into debris.
Uug.
A mouthful of blood escaped my mouth. And before I knew it, the bulking demon was madly surging at us.
Guys.
Iris shouted loudly. A wave of green mana appeared around us, enveloping us, but it couldn't do anything.
Fuck.
I'll need to reveal my identity. I gritted my teeth. If it wasn't for the Dark Order. And that was when I heard a familiar voice. You guys did well. Now, it's my time to play around a bit. He smiled faintly, his bloodied face and glowing red eyes making him look both terrifying and captivating under the dim light of the sun. The battlefield was quiet except for the growls of the bulking demon. It stood tall, its massive form radiating an ominous purple aura that made the air feel heavy. Its single remaining axe rested in its hand, dripping with black blood. In front of it stood the figure of a man wearing a faint smile on his face. His clothes were torn, blood streaked down his side, and his breathing was ragged. He held a sword in one hand, the blade faintly glowing in the moonlight. Behind him, 4 figures watched, all were heavily injured, but not as badly as the figure in front of them. And then it started.
Kuraraf.
The bulking demon roared, as his purple aura flared up wildly as it turned its bloodshot eyes toward Estrella. It snarled, raising one massive axe and slamming it into the ground with a deafening crash.
Boom.
The ground cracked beneath Estrella's feet, but he didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, his crimson eyes locking onto the demon with the same calm expression.
You're a noisy one, huh?
He gripped his Tai Chi sword tighter.
Estrella.
What the fuck are you doing? You're barely standing. Lucas, still recovering from the shockwave, shouted. Get back. Ella added, her golden sword glowing faintly in her grip. You're injured. You'll get yourself killed. But this time was Estrella's time to keep silent as he only added a few words. What do you guys know about me? He stepped towards the demon, before the demon beast suddenly lunged forward, swinging its remaining axe in a wide arc.
Swish.
Estrella ducked just in time, the blade of the axe whistling past his head and slicing through a crumbling pillar behind him. He retaliated with a quick, upward slash, the edge of his sword trailing faint frost as it grazed the demon's side.
Slash.
Black blood sprayed from the wound, hissing as it hit the ground. The demon howled in pain but didn't stop. Instead of using the axe, a massive fist came crashing down, aiming straight for Estrella's torso.
Bam.
The impact was brutal. Estrella flew backward, slamming into the jagged remains of a wall.
Estrella!
Iris screamed in panic. He's gonna get himself killed. Maya staggered to her feet, her own injuries evident as she gritted her teeth. Dust and debris clouded the area where Estrella had landed, but before anyone could rush to his aid, a shadow emerged from the haze. Estrella stood up, his body swaying slightly. His lips were stained with blood, but that faint smile still hadn't left his face. Is that all?
Kuraag!
As if the bulking demon understood his words, he roared once again, this time charging directly at him. Its massive body crushed the rubble beneath its feet as it swung its axes in a relentless barrage of attacks.
Clang! Clang!
Each strike was like thunder, and Estrella deflected as many as he could. He parried one blow after another, but it was clear the strain was getting to him. Until the axe managed to slip past his guard, slamming into his shoulder.
Splurt!
It penetrated his shoulder, getting stuck on Estrella's skin. However, despite the pain, Estrella didn't let out a single shout. Instead, he smiled, quite widely. I can't just stand here without helping. Iris's hands glowed as she prepared another healing spell. But before she could finish her spell, she saw Estrella taking down the axe from his shoulder before throwing it at the bulking demon who dodged the flying axe. Blood dripped from the corner of Estrella's mouth, pooling beneath him, but his red eyes never wavered. That was a good one, he added with a grin. The demon snarled, raising his foot for another strike. Thud! One of its massive feet came crashing down, aiming to crush Estrella where he knelt. Estrella moved at the last second, rolling out of the way and retaliating with a horizontal slash aimed at the demon's leg. Slash! The blade cut deep, frost spreading from the wound as the demon stumbled, its movements starting to slow down. It should be enough now, Estrella muttered as he leaped a few meters back. He staggered to his feet, gripping his sword with both hands now. His body was trembling, his breaths ragged, but the light in his eyes remained sharp.
Kuraka!
Ella stepped immediately forward, gripping her sword tightly. He can't handle this alone. Lucas, we need to hell. Wait, this power. Estrella's stance shifted, and his sword began to glow faintly. A pale, silvery light enveloped the sword, flickering like moonlight reflected on a frozen lake.
Kuraka!
The bulking demon, sensing the danger, charged once more, with its horns raised high.
Fu!
Estrella exhaled slowly, his body relaxing as he took a single step forward. The world seemed to fall silent for a brief moment. Moonlit ice lotus art.
Third move.
Moonlight's one flash.
Then he moved.
The battlefield froze as if time itself had paused for a heartbeat. Estrella's form was a blur, the thin luster of the moon trailing behind him like a meteor across the night. KSHHHD.
The sound was sharp, clean, and sudden.
A flash of silvery light split through the air, so bright it seemed to cut the very darkness surrounding them. It was almost as if the moon had descended into that moment, lending its luster to Estrella's sword.
Slash! Kura!
The bulking demon roared, jolting as it staggered at mid-charge, before freezing in place, staying in the same spot. His massive form quivered as if unsure of what had just happened.
Step!
Estrella appeared a few steps behind it, his sword pointing to the ground, its edge sopping with an icy gleam that faintly shimmered as frosts began building up along it. He was standing still, only breathing heavily, blood was dripping down from both his arms and sides. For a moment, only silence remained. Then, crack! A deep fissure ran through the center of the demon's body, splitting it from head to toe. The demon's roaring turned into a choking gurgle as its form began to collapse on itself. Black blood gushed out, hissing as it touched the frozen ground beneath it.
Boom!
The body of the demon fell onto the earth, cut neatly in half, and its purple aura flew away, scattering like smoke in the wind. It was over. The battlefield remained silent for a few seconds, everyone staring in disbelief at the fallen demon beast.
He killed it.
Iris muttered, holding her arm as she looked at Estrella's figure.
Estrella!
Ella, who had been ready to charge earlier, murmured, gripping her sword tightly as she took a hesitant step forward. Nobody could believe that he had killed a named demon beast. How did he, after everything, how did he still manage to? Lucas gritted his teeth as he staggered to get up. He was beyond shocked to see that Estrella had really killed the demon beast. I could also kill it, but he didn't use any holy type attack or weapon. He killed it with pure swordsmanship aura. That was a level that Lucas had tried to pry into but couldn't. At that moment, Estrella turned slightly, his faint smile still in place. His crimson eyes glowed faintly under the moonlight, but his legs wobbled. Ah, guess I overdid it a little.
Thud.
He dropped to his knees, his sword clattering to the ground beside him. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the frost-covered earth.
Caw.
A mouthful of blood escaped his mouth as he clenched his chest with his hand. However, his efforts didn't go to waste. Your strength and vitality attributes have been increased by 1 da. After months, his attributes had finally increased.
Estria.
The group started approaching him, but unfortunately, Estria couldn't exactly reply as his vision started getting blurrier. His eyelids slowly closed as lastly saw a hand reaching out to him.
Ugh.
The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the warmth. It wasn't the kind of suffocating heat from a battlefield drenched in blood and flames, but a soft, soothing warmth that felt quite comforting. The second thing I noticed was the ceiling. High, arched, and bathed in gentle colors from the sunlight filtering through stained glass windows. Am I inside the cathedral? I distinctly remember the ceiling when I was in the saintess's room.
Wait. Does this mean?
My body ached all over as I tried to move, yet I couldn't. Someone, was holding me down. Slowly, I tilted my head down. There she was, the saintess, fast asleep on my legs. Her golden hair spilled across me like soft threads of sunlight, and her peaceful face seemed to glow under the dim sunbeams streaming through the windows. Her breathing was steady, her delicate features relaxed in a way that made her look almost unreal.
Skies.
I froze, cursing silently, unsure of how to process what I was seeing.
MHM.
Her fingers twitched slightly, brushing against the blanket covering me. She sighed softly, snuggling closer as if she didn't want to wake up. Okay, calm down, I told myself, taking a slow, deep breath. My heart was racing. Why the hell was my heart racing? I searched around the room for answers. The cathedral was silent, that kind of silence which is almost holy. A washbasin of water sat on the little table beside him, bandages folded nicely in them. There was an almost imperceptible, comfortable aroma of herbs in the air. Someone had treated me, which was obvious. After all, she was here. My gaze drifted back to her, still sleeping soundly on my legs.
She looked so peaceful.
Her light, golden robes were slightly wrinkled, probably from staying here all night. The golden sunlight kissed her face, making her look like some kind of angel.
Ah, this completely ruined my plans.
My hand ached as I reached over to her head, caressing softly her golden locks. What am I supposed to do now? I muttered to myself, as I took my hand away. Moving felt like an impossibility. My entire body screamed in protest, and the last thing I wanted was to wake her. So I slowly let my head fall against the wall behind me and looked up at the vaulted ceiling. The intricately carved and depicted scenes of angels and holy symbols seemed to mock me, as if asking what someone like me was doing in a place like this. I couldn't even remember how I got here. The last thing I remembered was when I used the third move of my sword art. Third move, Moonlight's One Flash. In my entire life, I had only used it a little over 20 times, and the 4 remaining moves even fewer times than that. All of them needed a large amount of mana, and I couldn't hold that much of mana. At least for now, and that's probably the reason the grade of the sword art is S. I didn't sharpen it enough to reveal its true rank. But then, an image popped up in my mind, the bulking demon cleaved in two, then a sharp pain in my chest. Everything else after that was fuzzy. I guess I really overdid it, huh?
You're awake.
A soft voice suddenly broke through my thoughts.
I looked down, startled.
Christina's eyes were half open, their usual radiant pink dulled by sleep. She blinked a few times, as if trying to shake off the remnants of her dream, then sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. Sorry, I didn't want you to see me like this. Christina gave me a faint smile that contained a hint of warmth. I didn't mean to fall asleep like that. Hearing her words, I also smiled in response. It's all right, and I'm sorry. I bent down my head. The bulking demon suddenly appeared, and I couldn't simply let the civilians die, so I didn't act only mind in.
It's okay. I understand.
I felt a delicate hand brushing itself against my cheek. I looked forward and saw the most beautiful smile that I had ever seen. Her head was tilted to the right, and her lips were slightly parted from each other, with the perfect features of her face being framed by the dim sunlight. You did great. As if talking to a child, she said those words in a really soft tone that could probably melt any living being in the entire world. Time seemed to have stopped as we stared at each other's eyes.
Ahem.
A voice suddenly broke the time as we immediately retracted back from each other. I'm sorry for disturbing you lovebirds, but the saintess is needed. John with his sarcastic smile uttered with a small smile.
All right.
Christina stood up, holding the hems of her robe before leaving the room in a rush. Then, John sat down at the edge of the bed, giving me a wry smile. Did I interrupt your special moment? His voice came out in a teasing tone.
Yes.
I didn't have to deny it. The atmosphere from a few moments ago was just perfect for me to lean in and kiss her reddish-pink lips.
Ha ha ha.
I'm sorry, but the Saintess was really needed.
MHM? Why?
I couldn't help but ask in curiosity. One of the patients was infected by the Dark Order's curse.
What?
His words completely caught me off guard.
Dark Order.
Hearing that name was enough to send a shiver down anyone's spine. It was the main evil organization across the entire world. Basically, a cult that preferred chaos and destruction over peace. While most people followed the heavenly god, the Dark Order sought the opposite. They devoted themselves to the evil god, the being that once destroyed the world. Their methods were just as terrifying as their beliefs. I have seen several horrible scenes in the novel that spread the horror of the organization. They did not just kill, they destroyed people from the inside out. Their curses were a dark magic that clung to a person's soul, spreading like poison. It wasn't something regular healing magic could fix. Once the curse took hold, it was like watching someone slowly unravel, their body and mind breaking down piece by piece.
But even so, they didn't stop just with people.
For example, the Dark Order's power also affected the bulking demon's power since he had that same ominous purple aura around him. That's probably why the Saintess was so urgently needed. Her connection to the heavenly god meant she could purify things that others couldn't, and until one found a cure, she'd be the only one able to heal those patients. By the way, John snapped me out of my thoughts.
Huh? Yeah.
You'll need to stay here for a week or so.
I see. Wait, what?
As if expecting my delayed reaction, John let out a deep sigh as he reached out to my right arm and suddenly started inserting mana into my veins.
Hold still.
He muttered before I even had a chance to ask what he was doing. Suddenly, I felt a surge of mana flooding into my veins.
Gah!
I let out a cry of pain. Pain exploded in my arm, sharp and searing. I clenched my teeth, trying not to yell again. My eyes darted to my arm, then to John's face, wide with confusion and a little panic. You fractured one of your mana channels. He explained in an extremely calm manner that was kind of annoying. It'll take at least a week to heal properly. Normally, this would be a big problem, but with the Saintess here, it should be manageable. I nodded at his words, but despite that, I was still shocked. Fractured mana channel?
That was bad. Really bad.
Mana channels are like lifelines for a mage, and even though I'm a magic swordsman, it's still one of my core points. Usually, a body contains a mana channel in each part of it. From head to toe, there are exactly 15 total mana channels. They all are directed to a single part, which is the heart. The heart is the one that absorbs mana and then spreads it through the mana channels. And all of that meant that I couldn't transfer mana into my right arm. But how did I get such a gruesome injury?
Also,
I suggest that you avoid fighting against anyone before the Academy's competition. When you were in a coma for 3 days, the Saintess did a whole body analysis.
John then added, 3 days. Yeah.
And she was definitely not happy. She was mad and shocked after seeing the state you were in. Most of your mana channels were at their limit because you kept forcing more mana than your capacity allows.
Ah.
It was at that moment that I knew how my mana channel fractured. I really shouldn't have used the Moonlight's one flash move. But don't worry. He winked at me with a small and annoying smirk. It could be worse. John patted my shoulder before waving his hand and getting out of the room, leaving me completely alone with my thoughts. 4 days had already passed since I arrived at the capital, and if I needed to stay here for a whole week, that left me with just 3 days to prepare for the competition once I got out.
Fuuak.
I groaned, letting out a long yet tired curse. And since I was stuck here in the cathedral, I might as well train mana. Of course, using my left arm and not the right one. It was the only thing I could do. Train my mana control. The week had been painfully slow. And finally, today is the day I'd get out of here. I spent the whole week training my mana control and it improved a tiny bit, but other than that, nothing happened. Except for the part where my classmates immediately visited me after knowing that I was highly injured, especially my professor who only teased me once she got here. And no one from Lucas's party visited me. I saved their asses, but they didn't even thank me. Well, I guess I should be thankful that they brought me here.
Whatever.
The only thing that I'm worried about is that slime girl that I left at home. I totally forgot about her, and when I remembered, I tried to sneak out but the Saintess caught me. Ah, it's done, your mana channel has been healed. Saintess Christina said softly, snapping me out of my thoughts as she pulled her glowing hand away from my arm. A gentle warmth lingered where her magic had been. She then looked at me as her reddish-pink lips parted. "You'll be the exchange student this time, right?"
MHM?
"How do you know about that?" I asked in confusion. Usually, the information about the student exchange program is only known to professors or the headmasters of the academy. There was no way she could have known unless.
So, it's true, huh? Damn it.
I realized too late that I'd walked right into her trap. As if to rub it in, she let out a soft giggle, the kind that somehow made you feel both annoyed and charmed at the same time. I had a hunch initially, but now,
I'm sure. Damned sly fox.
"You're thinking something bad about me, aren't you?" she quickly added, narrowing her eyes playfully.
Fuck. No, of course not.
She just stared at me, tilting her head slightly. The way her eyes locked onto mine made it hard to tell if she was serious or just playing around. Either way, I didn't dare push my luck. After a bit of teasing from the Saintess, I finally convinced her to drop the joke. She gave me one last smirk before waving me off. "Take care of yourself, Brother Estria," she said with a tone that felt half mocking, half genuine. I didn't even bother responding. I just gave her a slight nod and quickly left the cathedral before she found another reason to mess with me. Then, I headed towards the hotel, though my mind kept circling back to the slime girl I'd left behind. She was probably fine. Slimes didn't need to eat regularly, right?
Right?
She didn't eat any of my clothes, did she? When I finally reached the hotel and stood outside the door, I was deeply contemplating whether to open the door or not. Inserting the key into the keyhole, I twisted the handle.
Then, I pushed the door open. Swoosh.
Before I could even take a step inside, something small and fast launched itself at me like a missile.
Whoa.
I barely had any time to react before the squishy figure of the slime girl latched onto me. Her body, soft and cool to the touch, clung to mine like superglue. Her arms, or what passed for arms, wrapped tightly around my torso, and her big glossy eyes shimmered as she looked up at me. The translucent green of her body had a faint, happy glow, like she was practically vibrating with joy. All right, calm down," I said, trying to get her off gently, though it was like trying to separate two pieces of Velcro.
"Master,"
she whined, puffing her cheeks, or at least making them look puffed.
"What now?"
I replied with a sigh, carefully closing the door behind me as she clung to my torso like a limpet. With her clung to me, I walked towards my bed while looking around the room. Thankfully, nothing got damaged.
Now back to her.
Now wait a second. Did she just talk? You can talk, I asked in a weird manner, as I tried to push her back. In response, she did the same, tilting her head from days ago before nodding enthusiastically.
How?
I raised an eyebrow in confusion. She didn't answer with words right away. Instead, she pointed at my left hand, specifically at the faint tattoo on my ring finger. The mark I got when I made the blood contract with the morph weapon. After that, she pointed at her belly, or what I assumed was her belly, where a similar tattoo glowed faintly. Don't tell me, you and the morph weapon can be considered as one?
MHM.
This time, she made a noise to indicate her agreement and clung back to me. Seeing this, I needed to test something. Poof. She suddenly disappeared from my view, and I saw the tattoo on my finger glowing faintly. Then I tried to summon her again, but instead, the weapon appeared.
How do I?
Before I could finish my words, the gun that was initially in my hand turned into the slime girl. Master is so fun to play with, she said, giggling as she wrapped her gooey arms around me again.
Of course.
The morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, bathing the hotel room in a soft glow. I sat cross-legged on the hotel's bed, focusing on the mana flow in my right arm. It stings, but I needed to get used to this small pain. And I shouldn't use Moonlight's one flash for at least a month or so. If I used it again, I could actually rupture this mana channel of mine. As for the slime girl, she was sprawled across the couch, her translucent form shimmering slightly in the light. She looked oddly peaceful, as if she hadn't spent the whole day clinging to me like her life depended on it. Master. The slime girl suddenly turned towards me and muttered in a soft tone.
Yeah. Name. Right.
Until now I've been calling her slime girl. Can't you simply choose it yourself? I asked as if started forming a ball made of mana and started increasing its concentration. This could help me improve my mana control because I needed to keep it at a certain concentration so the mana ball wouldn't explode. It has to be Master giving me one.
Sure.
As soon as I said those words, she perked up instantly, her jelly-like form bouncing slightly as she stared at me with wide, expectant eyes.
Stella. Nah.
Kiera. It doesn't seem to fit her.
Ah, I know.
How about Lumi? I suggested after a few moments. It felt fitting, given her glowing, semi-transparent form.
Lumi.
She repeated slowly, then broke into a delighted smile.
Lumi.
Glad you like it. I leaned against the headboard. The mana ball in my hand flickered slightly, and I steadied it again. Training was pretty much all I had to do for now.
That, and wait.
And not to mention that I have a useless system. I mean, if you're going to give me a system, at least make it useful instead of just showing a status window. For that, I can use the Academy's evaluation stone to measure my power.
Ding. Huh? What was that?
A faint, translucent blue window suddenly appeared in front of me, its edges glowing softly. Compatibility calibration has reached 100%.
The special feature.
Book reading has been activated.
Book reading?
I muttered, my eyebrows furrowed. And before I could make sense of it,
swoosh.
The blue system window faded into nothingness as my surroundings changed in a flash.
Ah.
My vision blurred, and when it cleared, I was no longer in the hotel room. I stood right in the middle of a dense forest, with tall trees stretching up high, which seemed not to allow enough sunlight to break through. Their twisted roots sprawled across the dirty ground, making it hard to move without stumbling. A faint mist hung in the air, growing thicker the farther it stretched, and I could hear the distant sound of rushing water.
This?
Where am I? The ground was a mess of broken branches and scorched patches of earth. The smell of burned wood was strong, mixed with something sharp and metallic.
Blood.
It was definitely blood.
Clang.
The clash of metal jolted me, snapping me out of my thoughts. My eyes darted around and then I saw them, shadows slipping between the trees, with their red eyes glowing like flames in the ominous mist. A low growl rumbled somewhere ahead, followed by the grating sound of claws dragging across the ground. I immediately gripped my sword tightly. I didn't even remember how it was in my hand, but I made sure to prepare myself for anything. The air felt heavy, like something dangerous was watching over me. Something big.
Until they stepped into the open.
One by one, demon beasts emerged from the shadows. I couldn't exactly see their faces, but they were huge, at least 5 times my height, with jagged black fur and eyes that burned sharply. Their fangs gleamed, sharp and deadly, and their claws, coated in a sickly green venom, scratched the ground as they moved closer. High-ranking demon beasts. And they weren't only a handful. There were at least tens of them, possibly even hundreds. But then, an even bigger one came out. I couldn't really see its form, but from the aura he was emitting, it was definitely a named demon beast. The only thing I could see was its horns that curled back from its head, and just as he took a step, it shook the earth beneath me. I took a small step back, and then glanced around. The trees formed a rough circle with their roots acting like natural walls. And behind me was the river that I heard earlier. Rag. The beasts started crawling towards me, and their heavy bodies shook the ground at every movement.
This was bad. Really bad.
My hand gripped the hilt of my sword even more tightly than before. I started gathering mana around my body. But surprisingly, I couldn't manifest an ounce of mana.
Shit. Swish.
The named demon beast suddenly lunged forward as its claws ripped through the earth. And in just a matter of seconds, it appeared right in front of me, raising its claw, aiming at my chest. Time seemed to slow as I raised my sword, ready to protect against the attack, but then,
swoosh. Gah.
I gasped, my body jerking back to reality. The hotel room came back into view, and I found myself sitting on the bed, drenched in sweat. My chest heaved, and my hands trembled as I struggled to steady my breathing.
What was that? Master.
I heard Lumi's concerned voice as she wobbled over to me. I'm alright, ha. I muttered, though the pounding of my heart and the sweat dripping down my forehead told a completely different story. At that moment, I caught the faint glow of the system window lingering in the corner of my vision. The feature book reading has been disabled. You have glimpsed at a potential outcome.
A potential outcome?
Does that mean there's a chance of that scene happening? If that's true, fuck. That's going to be a very large problem. My chest sank. If hordes of high-ranking demon beasts really appeared in the capital, it's not just my problem, it's a disaster waiting to happen. I need to quickly contact the Sword Circle or the Holy Nation. Without thinking, I jumped out of bed, startling Lumi.
Master?
She asked, her head tilting in confusion as her form wobbled slightly. I need to check something. I muttered the words quickly, grabbing for my student ID. It was the fastest way to contact my professor, or anyone from the Sword Circle or the Holy Nation. However, before I could activate the ID, another interface appeared right in front of me, stopping me in my actions.
Estria. What?
My eyes blinked in discomfort as I saw the system's notification with my name. Think well before you act. It showed you a potential outcome, not exactly the future. All actions lead to something. You just need to figure out what leads to that. If the problem is successfully resolved, you'll be granted a reward for your heroic actions. If not, there might be a disaster.
Good luck. You'll need it.
I froze at the horde of notifications.
A potential outcome.
Not guaranteed to happen, but not impossible either.
Foo.
I let out a shaky breath and slowly sat back on the bed. Lumi, still perched on the couch, watched me with her wide, curious eyes, though she didn't say anything. Damn it. Figure out what leads to that. It sounded easier said than done. But what exactly could cause a horde of high-ranking demon beasts?
The Dark Order? If so,
how could I exactly prevent this without warning the Dark Order of my actions?
Fuck.
It seems that I'll need to be extra careful during the Academy's competition.
Fuck.
Lumi muttered aloud.
Huh? Fuck.
She started repeating those words. It looked cute with her soft, innocent voice, but the word she was saying.
Gosh. Give me a break.
The morning breeze filtered through the open window, carrying the faint scent of flowers from the garden below. I leaned against the small table in my hotel room, staring at the system message still faintly glowing in my vision. Think well before you act. What's up with those cryptic messages? When I read novels, I always found these kind of messages annoying. Couldn't you simply tell the main protagonist directly instead of pulling it around? I should speak with my professor. After all, she is still one of the informants in the capital. I sighed, running a hand through my hand. The first thought that came to mind when I saw the message was Professor Vivian. She has a pretty high status in the capital, being one of the most popular informants. If I'm not entirely wrong, she was once the head of the capital's intelligence network. However, she did quit, don't know why. Yeah, I should pay her a visit.
Lumi. MHM?
She stirred, her slimy body stretching lazily. I'm heading out for a bit, alright?
Swoosh.
As soon as those words left my mouth, a missile came directly at me, wrapping her legs around my waist and her arms around my neck.
No.
Lumi spoke in a muffled and reluctant tone, and as if expressing herself, her body wrapped even more tightly around me, coiling like a snake.
Lumi.
This time, I'll come back soon.
I tapped her head a few times.
It took a few seconds, but then, she finally looked up at me.
Promise?
Her sparkling eyes stared right into mine.
Promise.
I nodded at her words, smiling softly at her.
Fine.
She unwrapped herself around me and went back to the sofa. She was somehow obsessed with the sofa. All she was doing was staring at the ceiling while sprawled on the sofa. I grabbed my coat and stepped out into the hallway before saying goodbye to Lumi. Which, she did not reply to me. She must be irritated that I didn't spend much time with her. I should get her a small gift, but what exactly do slimes like? Anyways, Professor Vivian's room was a few floors up in the same hotel. It wasn't unusual for instructors to be in the same hotel or even floor, because if there was an emergency the professors could act fast. So, I went to the elevator and tapped the last floor button. Gosh, she really needed to be extravagant. It took a few minutes, and I was lucky enough not to meet anyone on the way up. Then as the elevator opened, I walked down the hallway until I stood in front of her door before pressing the doorbell. A soft chime rang from inside. Moments later the door opened, and there she was, Professor Vivian. Her long silky red hair cascaded over her shoulders, glowing faintly in the light from the hallway. She wore a fitted blouse that accentuated her figure, paired with a high-waisted pencil skirt that hugged her curves. Her emerald green tie rested neatly against her chest, with a name tag pinned to it. And surprisingly, she was wearing glasses.
Estria.
Her eyes seemed to have widened slightly in surprise, but a delighted smile quickly spread across her face. Well, this is a pleasant surprise.
Come in.
She stepped aside, her hair swaying gently as she gestured for me to enter.
Thank you.
I replied softly, entering her room. Her suite was much larger and cozier than mine. The living room had plush furniture arranged neatly around a small coffee table. A faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air, and soft sunlight streamed in through the half-drawn curtains, giving the space a warm, relaxing atmosphere. Make yourself comfortable, she said, motioning to the couch. I'll make us some tea. She walked towards the kitchen area with small steps, so I sat on the sofa, leaning back slightly as I took a deeper look at her room. The space was immaculately organized, with a few books stacked neatly on the side table and a vase of fresh flowers on the windowsill.
It fits her.
After a while, Vivian returned shortly, carrying a tray with 2 steaming cups of tea. She placed it on the coffee table and handed me a cup with a small smile. "Here you go," she said, sitting down across from me. She smoothed out her skirt and crossed her legs elegantly, the sunlight streaming in through the window catching the glossy red strands of her hair. Then she leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees as her smile widened. "It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk. What brings you here, my dear star student?" Her voice carried a playful warmth, but the way she emphasized the last 2 words made me feel like she was teasing me. I stared into the swirling tea before taking a small sip. Then, I met her eyes as I put the tea back on the coffee table. "I need some help." Hearing my words, Vivian's smile faltered for a moment. "I see," she said softly, leaning back into the sofa. She crossed her legs again, her expression shifting into something more serious as she took a sip of her own tea. There was a brief pause, and then her gaze locked onto mine. Her voice was cooler this time, almost detached as she asked, "Are you currently asking for Vivian or Professor Vivian?"
Vivian. Very well.
She raised an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. She reached up and removed her glasses, placing them neatly on the side table. The simple act seemed to strip away the professional barrier between us. She adjusted her posture slightly, crossing her legs the other way and resting one arm on the back of the sofa. "What exactly do you need?" "Information about every kind of demon that has been encountered in the capital."
I went straight to the point. Tap, tap.
As soon as she heard my words, her fingers started tapping lightly against her arm as she crossed them, her expression shifting into something more thoughtful. Her gaze lingered on me for a few moments, and her expression softened slightly. "May I ask the reason?" "I need demon beasts' cores," I replied quickly, too quickly if you ask me. But it was all to make sure she didn't suspect that I would be lying to her. Unlike the Saintess, Professor Vivian didn't seem to have a special lie detection ability. For a moment, she simply sat there, tapping her arm as her gaze grew distant. Then, with a small sigh, she uncrossed her legs and leaned forward again, resting her chin on her hand. "You're not exactly giving me much to go on." She let out a small sigh. "But if it's cores you're after, the type of demon makes all the difference. There are low-level demons scattered around, but if you're targeting something stronger." She trailed off, her golden eyes staring deeply into mine. "Ah. I really like that calm expression of yours." Vivian smiled lightly, before getting up from the sofa. "I'll go and get the documents, I've been searching about myself." And just a few moments later, Vivian returned from her shelf with a slim notebook in hand, her lips curved into a faint smile. She sat back down across from me, flipping through the pages as her fingers delicately brushed over the handwritten notes. "All right," she said, glancing up at me. "I've got plenty of information about the demon activity in the capital. But..." She trailed off as her eyes glinted mischievously. "But..." She closed the notebook with a soft thud and leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. Her expression turned teasing, her lips curling into a playful smile. "But I'm not just going to hand it over for free."
That's obvious. I nodded in response.
Even if she was my professor, now I was talking with Vivian and not Professor Vivian. If I wanted information, I needed to give something in return. Crossing my arms, I finally asked, "What exactly do you want?" At my words, Vivian's smile widened, and she tapped a finger against her chin as if she were pondering something. Then, she leaned back, crossing her legs again.
A date. A date?
I repeated her words in a surprised tone. Was she joking or something?
I don't get it.
But then, her next words confirmed my thoughts. "Exactly, a date between only us two.
A proper one.
Dinner, maybe a walk, whatever strikes our fancy. What do you say?" She tilted her head slightly as though it were the most natural thing in the world. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Was she serious? I couldn't tell if this was one of her jokes or if she was genuinely asking. "Are you joking?" I couldn't help but finally ask. She shook her head, her smile never faltering. "I'm completely serious. If you want this notebook, that's my only condition.
One date.
Think of it as an exchange of favors. You're my professor, though. Outside the academy, I'm just Vivian," she said smoothly, brushing a strand of her red hair behind her ear. "And don't overthink it. It's just one little date." Surely that's not too much to ask, is it?
Sigh.
You really won't give me the information unless I agree, will you?
Bingo. She smiled.
There was a moment of silence as I considered my options. On one hand, this felt awkward to say the least. But on the other hand, I needed that information. Sure, one date. Vivian's smile grew, and there was a mischievous glint in her eyes. I'll hold you to that. She handed me the notebook, her fingers brushing against mine for a brief moment.
Here.
This should give you what you need. And don't forget, this means you owe me some quality time. I took the notebook, flipping it open briefly to glance at the notes. It was packed with details, locations, types of demons, and even a few theories on their patterns of behavior. This was exactly what I needed.
Thanks.
Don't thank me yet, she said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. I'll be expecting you to deliver on your promise. Let's say, tomorrow evening. Tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow, she said, her smile turning playful again. I'll text you the details.
Now off you go.
I've got to prepare for our date. Before I could respond, she was already ushering me toward the door with a cheerful tone. As I stepped out into the hallway, notebook in hand, I couldn't help but feel like I had just been dragged into something far more complicated than I anticipated.
Still, a promise was a promise.
And as the door clicked shut behind me, one thought remained in my mind. What have I gotten myself into this time?
Damn.
Why am I so nervous? I muttered to myself. I wasn't usually the type to fuss over my appearance, but this time felt different. A date with Professor Vivian wasn't exactly something I'd ever imagined. And yet here I was, dressing up for it. I wore a clean white dress shirt, paired with a black vest that hugged my torso just right. Over it, I threw on a navy blue coat, sharp and tailored, with silver buttons that ran down the side. My pants were dark, neatly ironed, and went perfectly with the polished black boots I'd slipped on earlier.
Is this too formal?
I couldn't help but ask myself, turning around to check how the outfit fit from the back. I didn't go on many dates honestly, and always wore what my assistant thought was fit for the occasion.
Lumi?
How do I look?
From the couch, Lumi perked up.
Her translucent green form rippled slightly as she hopped off and floated toward me. She stopped right beside me, her round eyes scanning me up and down. After a moment of silence, she let out an approving hum. Master looks divine. Lumi uttered with a big smile. I only chuckled at her words, taking one last glance at the mirror. My silver bluish hair was neatly combed, and styled with a classic slickback, with a few strands falling on my eyes. Those looked quite messy, but yeah, I had already lost too much time. Then, I'll be going now, Lumi. I spoke to her, picking up my coat. Lumi waved as I grabbed the room key and left the hotel. The streets of the capital were still alive despite being quite late. Lanterns began to flicker on as the sunlight faded, and the city's main street was filled with people finishing up their shopping or heading out to eat dinner. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of baked bread and flowers from the nearby stalls. And surprisingly, I was getting quite the looks from the ladies around. Too many looks if you asked me. Besides, this silver bluish hair of mine is probably unique and Estria is already naturally handsome, so this seems quite natural. Vivian told me to meet her on the fountain of the main street.
Oh. Found it.
I spotted the stone fountain at the center of the main street. The soft sound of running water reached my ears as I approached. And besides the fountain, there she was. Staying beside the fountain with her red hair catching the light of the lanterns like a cascade of fire. My steps faltered for a brief second as my eyes took her in. Vivian was dressed in an elegant black evening gown that hugged her figure perfectly. The gown's off-shoulder design revealed her collarbones and a slit on the side of the dress ran up to her knee, showing just enough of her smooth, pale skin. A thin silver necklace rested around her neck, shimmering faintly as it caught the light. Her heels clicked softly against the stone as she shifted her weight, her eyes scanning the crowd before locking onto me. A soft smile appeared on her lips as she stood up straight. Damn. She looked absolutely stunning.
Gorgeous, even.
There really was no other word for it. Vivian must have noticed the slight pause in my step because she turned her head, with her golden eyes locking onto mine. A teasing smile immediately crept across her face as she tilted her head ever so slightly. Did I leave you speechless already, my dear Estria?
This woman.
I cleared my throat, forcing my expression to remain calm as I walked the rest of the way toward her. You look amazing. I smiled faintly, even tracing her whole body with my eyes, to emphasize my words. Vivian's lips curled into a pleased smile upon hearing my words.
MHM, certainly.
I spent a few hours getting ready. Her voice was playful, but then her smile shifted into something far more mischievous. Leaning forward slightly, she added with a sly glint in her eyes. Just for you, my dear Estria.
She winked.
And before I could say anything, she continued, taking a step closer, her heels making soft click-clack sounds on the pavement. And you look quite dashing yourself, my dear student, she said smoothly, her eyes flicking over my outfit. I didn't expect you to clean up so well.
Thank you. Aha.
After hearing my blunt response, her cheeks puffed a bit before breaking into a small smile.
Shall we go? Lead away.
Vivian slipped her arm through mine before I could react, catching me off guard. She looked up at me with a sly smile.
What?
Isn't this what people do on dates? Sure, do you want me to hold your waist? We're not there yet. She shot back with a playful grin, shaking her head lightly. Her words lingered for a second, but I was already used to her teasing me, so I matched her small smile as we began walking down the lively street. And where exactly are we going? I asked after a while, which made her turn her gaze to me. That's for me to decide. She brushed her hand against my arm slightly, catching my attention.
Don't worry.
I've got the perfect place in mind.
Wink, wink.
I gave her a sideways glance. You planned this out? To my words, she smirked as her chest puffed out.
Of course.
A date with my star student deserves some effort, don't you think? I stared at her for a moment, unsure of how to respond. After a pause, I gave her a small nod. I suppose so. Vivian laughed softly at my lackluster response as her fingers brushed against my arm again, as if to tease me further.
MHM?
The scent of freshly baked pastries, grilled meats, and sweet drinks suddenly reached out to my nostrils, and it seemed to have reached Vivian's too. Do you smell that? Vivian suddenly asked, her eyes lighting up as her head turned toward a nearby food stall. Yeah, it really reached her. I glanced over and noticed the vendor flipping what looked like small, round cakes on a sizzling grill. The sweet, buttery smell wafted over to us, and Vivian tugged me in that direction before I could utter a single word. These are moon cakes, the vendor said with a cheerful grin when we approached. Perfect for an evening stroll. Soft, sweet and warm, just like love, don't you think? He gave us a playful wink. Gosh. I guess we do kinda look like a couple. How romantic. Don't you think so, Estria? She laughed, before then looking at me with a teasing gaze. I think you're just hungry. I replied flatly, though I couldn't stop the slight smirk tugging at my lips. She turned back to the vendor, ignoring my comment. 2, please. Coming right up. While the vendor prepared the cakes, Vivian turned her attention to me, her arm still looped through mine. You're no fun, you know that? I'm plenty of fun, I replied, raising an eyebrow. I just don't see the need to pretend food is poetry. Besides, you'll probably make me pay for these cakes. Food is poetry if you enjoy it enough, she shot back with a small grin. But don't worry, I'll teach you to appreciate the finer things in life. You can start by paying for these cakes. I knew it. So that was your plan? I asked, making a look of betrayal as I handed the vendor a few coins, and also telling him to keep the change. I get lured out on a date, and now I'm the one paying? Oh, don't be so dramatic. Vivian smiled as she took the warm cake from the vendor, handing one to me. Thank you, sir. She said politely before turning back to me. See? It's worth it. I shook my head but took a bite of the cake anyway. It was soft, warm, and sweet with a slight honeyed flavor. I had to admit, it was pretty good. Not bad, right? Vivian asked, looking at me with a victorious grin. Sure. I knew it. She laughed sweetly. But, let's keep walking. I don't want us to be late for dinner. You made a reservation? It must be pretty fancy. You know it. By the time we reached the restaurant, the street had grown quieter, though the charm of the capital remained. The place Vivian had chosen was tucked away at the corner of a cobbled square, its golden lights shining warmly through tall glass windows. A few tables had been set outside under the soft glow of lanterns, where couples laughed quietly over plates of food. The smell of herbs, roasted meats, and fine wine lingered in the air. It really is fancy. Only the best for my dear Estria. She teased me once again, giving me yet another wink as we were shown to a table near the window. The inside of the restaurant was warm and elegant, with soft music playing in the background. Candles flickered gently at each table, and the soft hum of conversation created a comfortable atmosphere. As we sat down, Vivian looked across at me with a pleased smile splattered on her gorgeous face. What? Oh, nothing. She rested her head on her chin, looking at me with those shiny golden eyes. I'm just enjoying the fact that my star student is on a date with me.
It's cute.
You're strangely smug about this. I replied back, leaning against the chair.
It was quite comfy.
I should get one of these. I noted in the back of my mind.
Of course I am.
I worked hard for this, you know. She waved a hand dramatically before picking up the menu. Now, what do you feel like eating? You're actually letting me choose? I raised an eyebrow.
Well, no.
I was just being polite. She smiled back before calling the waiter.
This woman.
After a few minutes, the food arrived soon after. Roasted meats glazed with spices, soft bread fresh from the oven, and bowls of fragrant soup. We started eating, and Vivian immediately started the conversation, which soon led to her experiences teaching students. And then he accidentally summoned a water spirit in the middle of class, Vivian was saying as she took a sip of her wine, taking breaks to let out a small laugh. The entire classroom was soaked within minutes. I swear I'll never forget the look on his face, completely drenched but still trying to act like it was intentional. Sounds like your students are a handful, I replied with a small smile. If that happened with any of my classmates, we'd probably laugh out loud, but in the end, I would buy him or her a meal.
Oh, they are.
But they're good kids, just like you. She smiled playfully.
Ah, really?
Then should I consider you a predator for taking a kid on a date? I replied back with an even wider smile. You're man enough for that. She avoided my gaze for a while. But soon enough, she started laughing as I did the same.
We were having fun.
Unfortunately, that fun was about to come to an end. We left the restaurant about an hour later, the night now fully settled over the capital. The streets had grown quieter, with only a few people wandering here and there. Vivian slipped her arm through mine again as we walked, her heels clicking softly on the stone pavement. I told you I had the perfect place in mind. She smiled proudly. Yeah, the food really was good. I smiled faintly, feeling the soft moonlight glowing on my face. Surprisingly, after seeing my smile, Vivian seemed to have frozen. Her lips were slightly parted from each other as she stared deep into my eyes. Click. She took a step forward as her arm slipped away from mine, and reached out to the direction of my neck.
This? I gulped down.
Wait. Why does this look familiar? Tap tap tap. The moment was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps.
Of course.
Who the fuck ruined the kiss scene this time? I glanced to the side and saw a group of men stepping out from the shadows of an alleyway. There were 4 of them, all wearing rough clothes and carrying poorly hidden knives. The man in front grinned wickedly, his eyes darting between Vivian and me. This guy. He's a D-rank user, and thinks he can assault us? Well, what do we have here? He sneered arrogantly.
A couple out for a fancy night, huh?
Looks like you've got plenty to spare. Why don't you hand over your wallet and make this easy? After hearing his words, my hand twitched toward where I normally kept my sword, though I hadn't brought it with me tonight. Well, I guess I'll need to beat him up instead of cutting him. But before I could do anything, Vivian let out a soft sigh from behind me. Really? She muttered with a disappointed tone. In the next second, everything happened at once.
Swish.
Vivian stepped forward, raised her hand, and with a quick flick of her wrist, an invisible force erupted from her fingertips. The robbers didn't stand a chance. Crash. All 4 of them were sent flying backward as though struck by a hurricane, crashing into barrels and crates with pained yelps. The leader's knife clattered uselessly to the ground as he groaned, sprawled out in a heap. I turned to Vivian, my mouth slightly open. She dusted off her hands with a satisfied smile and turned to me, having the most innocent expression ever on her face. Where were we? My lips twitched upon seeing her face. It's no surprise that her prestigious title is Red Devil. Upon saying those words, Vivian's lips curved into a playful smile as she tiptoed closer, her soft hands resting on my shoulders. Her head tilted naturally, and she leaned in, closing the distance between us. Her golden eyes glowed faintly under the soft moonlight, filled with amusement, and something else I couldn't quite place. For a moment, time seemed to slow, and all I could hear was the faint sound of my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Her face was so close now, her warm breath brushing against my cheek, and I could feel the atmosphere shift slightly. The teasing look in her eyes softened into something gentler, and my face instinctively grew warm. She was really going to do it. Vivian was actually going to kiss me. And yet, the mood was already ruined. Not to mention, I couldn't ignore the thought of someone spotting us. The professor, my professor, and me, her student, sharing a kiss in the middle of the capital's main street? Just imagining the rumors that would spread made my head hurt. But the way she looked at me, the faint glow in her golden eyes, the gentle curve of her lips, the warmth radiating from her, it made it impossible to think clearly. Before things could escalate, I did the only thing I could think of. I gently but firmly placed my hands on her shoulders and pushed her back just enough to create some distance between us. "What are you?" Vivian blinked at me, startled, her playful expression faltering for a moment.
Ah. Who am I kidding?
From the tip of my fingers, a flow of mana was injected into the ground, raising an invisible barrier around us. It wasn't a high-level barrier, but enough to make sure people wouldn't pry into us.
Ah?
Vivian's brows furrowed slightly in confusion, but before she could question me, I acted again. Sliding my hands down to her slender waist, I pulled her closer.
Russell.
The soft fabric of her dress brushed against my fingers as she stumbled forward, her body pressing lightly against mine. Her lips parted in surprise, but I didn't hesitate. I leaned in, closing the distance, and pressed my lips to hers.
MMH.
The faintest sound escaped her, a soft noise of surprise and delight. Her lips were warm, soft, and tasted faintly sweet, like honey and the faint bitterness of wine. For a heartbeat, she tensed against me as her breath hitched audibly. Then she melted into me. Her hands slid up from my shoulders, fingertips brushing against my neck before settling into my hair. Her luscious red lips pressed back against mine, and I could directly feel her smile, playful, teasing, yet impossibly soft.
Chew, smack, smack.
The sound of our lips meeting and parting filled the quiet space of the barrier, mingling with the faint flowing sound of magic in the air. Vivian tilted her head slightly, deepening the kiss. Her breath mingled with mine, warm and uneven, and the sensation sent a shiver down my spine. My hands tightened on her waist instinctively, pulling her closer until there was no space left between us. She shifted against me, her lips moving body as her fingers tangled in my hair, tugging lightly as if to pull me even closer.
MMPH.
A soft, breathy sound escaped her, and the warmth of it against my skin left me utterly undone. The kiss deepened naturally, growing bolder with every passing second. Her lips parted slightly, and I followed instinctively, the faint brush of her tongue against mine sending a jolt of heat through me.
Schlick.
The faint, wet sound of the kiss was intoxicating, amplified by the quiet that surrounded us. Her hands slid down to my chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt. With a soft rustle, she pushed me gently back, guiding me until my back pressed against the barrier.
Ah.
I let out a quiet gasp as the coldness of the barrier met my skin, but Vivian didn't give me time to recover. She leaned in again, capturing my lips with a fierceness that made me lose my breath. Smack, churu-choo. The sounds of our kiss grew louder, more urgent, as her body pressed fully against mine. Her lips left mine briefly, trailing soft, lingering kisses along my jawline.
NNH, churup.
I couldn't stop the faint sound that escaped me as her lips brushed the sensitive spot just below my ear.
Professor.
I guess you really are a predator. Hearing my words, Vivian chuckled softly. You only noticed that now? And immediately, her lips returned to mine. Her body pressed closer, her curves molding perfectly against mine.
MMPH.
Her breath hitched again, her hands sliding down my chest before wrapping lightly around my waist. The faint sound of her humming in contentment as she kissed me made my chest tighten. Smack, MMPH, schlick. But unfortunately, as much as I wanted to continue kissing her, I had promised Lumi that I'd get back before midnight.
Gah.
Our lips parted away, leaving a small bridge of saliva between them. Her lust-filled eyes met mine as her hands slowly reached into my shirt and started unbuttoning it. Vivian, let's stop now. Instead of slapping her hand away or something like that, I decided to be direct. Her hand that was unbuttoning my shirt paused slightly before it was retracted. Her lustful smile had also faltered a lot as she kept her head low. Why? Do you not like me after all this?
MHM?
Did you say anything? I was so focused on her actions that I didn't catch her words.
Nothing.
Her eyes finally met mine as a soft smile splattered over her face. Then, she stepped back over to me, slipping her arm through mine once more before I could protest. But this time, none of us said anything. We started walking again. Our pace was slow as we made our way back toward the more crowded parts of the capital. The streets were still quiet, but the lanterns burned warmly overhead, casting long shadows behind us. The night was calm, the air cool, and the earlier commotion or our hot moment felt like it had happened a lifetime ago.
Hey!
Vivian said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was unusually gentle, almost hesitant.
Yeah.
Did you have fun tonight? I turned my head slightly, looking down at her. She wasn't teasing this time. Her expression was sincere, her golden eyes watching me carefully as if waiting for my answer. I paused for a moment, but then quickly smiled. Yeah, I definitely did. Vivian's lips curved into a genuine smile.
Good.
We walked in silence for a little longer, the quiet night settling comfortably between us. I didn't mind it though. For all her teasing, Vivian's presence was easy.
Warm, even.
Eventually, she broke the quiet again. Next time though.
Next time.
She grinned, back to her usual self.
Of course.
You don't think this is going to be our only date, do you? You're already planning another? Naturally. A lady like me requires several dates to feel satisfied. You're unbelievable, I said again, though I couldn't stop myself from smiling. Vivian only winked in response, her arm holding mine a little tighter as we continued walking through the moonlit streets of the capital. Somehow, I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time I let her drag me into something like this. And soon enough, we reached the hotel. As we reached the front of the hotel, Vivian let go of my arm, her usual playful smile returning as she turned to face me.
Well, here we are.
Vivian spoke, brushing a strand of her red hair behind her ear.
Yeah.
Tonight was really fun. I licked my lips, emphasizing the last part.
Fun, huh?
I'll take that as a compliment, she teased, her golden eyes glinting under the warm glow of the lanterns. There was a pause, and I scratched the back of my neck, feeling a bit awkward now that the night was ending.
Then, a thought crossed my mind. Hey, Vivian.
MHM? She tilted her head with a curious gaze. What do slimes like? Vivian blinked, caught off guard by the sudden question.
Slimes. I nodded.
She tapped her chin, pretending to think for a moment before responding swiftly.
Sweet things.
Like sugar cubes.
Or honey.
Her answer came so quickly, so confidently, that I couldn't help but chuckle. Without thinking, I leaned in and gave her a quick peck on the lips.
Smack.
Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment, she stood there completely frozen. I stepped back, grinning as I waved over my shoulder.
Thanks.
Have a good night, Vivian. I turned and jogged into the hotel, leaving her standing there in stunned silence. What just happened? She mumbled to herself, her hand brushing her lips. A moment later, the realization hit her, and her face turned bright red. He caught me off guard, she whispered, her voice rising slightly with embarrassment and disbelief.
He.
Vivian's legs wobbled, and she staggered slightly before catching herself, her lips twitching between a pout and a smile.
Unbelievable. That little.
Meanwhile, inside the hotel, I wasted no time. I went straight to a nearby vending machine and grabbed a small jar of honey and some sugar cubes. Then, I hurried up the stairs to my room. The moment I opened the door, Lumi came flying at me. Whoosh.
Master.
She squealed softly, her small slime body glowing faintly as she launched herself into my arms.
Kook. Lumi.
I caught her, stumbling slightly from the impact. She giggled, her voice high and bubbly. You're back. I missed you. Yeah, I'm back. I replied, patting her squishy surface. And guess what I got for you? As soon as she heard my words, her eyes widened, sparkling with excitement.
For me? What is it? What is it?
I held up the jar of honey and the sugar cubes, and Lumi's entire body jiggled with joy.
Yay! Sweets!
She immediately tried to grab the jar, but I held it just out of reach.
Hold on, Lumi.
Let's get you settled first, I said, setting her down on the table. Lumi bounced up and down with enthusiasm.
Hurry, Master.
I'm so hungry. I opened the jar of honey and poured a small amount onto a plate, placing a sugar cube next to it.
Lumi didn't hesitate. Slurp. Slurp.
She devoured the honey and sugar with such delight that I couldn't help but laugh. This is so good. Lumi chirped, her body glowing even brighter.
Thank you, Master. You're the best. Yeah.
I smiled, sitting down on the edge of the bed. The events of the night finally started to catch up with me, and I let out a tired sigh. Lumi noticed and hopped over, landing beside me with a small bounce. Master, are you okay? She asked, tilting her little slime head. Yeah, just a little bit tired. I replied, giving her a small smile before adding. It's been a long day. She snuggled against my side, her soft, cool body pressing gently against me.
Don't worry, Master. Lumi's here.
I chuckled, resting a hand on her head.
Yeah, I know.
As I sat there with Lumi happily glowing beside me, I couldn't help but think back to Professor Vivian and her teasing smile. Tonight had been fun, to say the least. The royal capital was full of life, the streets were buzzing with excitement, as the sweet chirp of the birds flowed naturally through the air.
But today, there was a special event.
The Academy's competition. This wasn't just some small event, it was the competition where the best students from the 5 biggest academies faced off to prove who was the strongest. And there were currently 5 academies facing against each other. The previous champion, Eternum's Royal Academy, their students were the best of the best, mostly nobles from powerful families with talent and resources that seemed impossible to rival. Then, the Beastkin Academy, whose students are only beast people from the western continent where the law of the jungle rules. The Holy Academy, from which most priests and priestesses graduate, has significant power due to their divine energy, despite being primarily healing students. After that, there's the Sword Academy where most of the sword users come from, having excellent swordsmanship. This was also where the first Sword Duke graduated from. Finally, there's the Silverleaf Academy. There's nothing much to say about it, except that it was the weakest academy for 10 years straight, but this time there's a horrendous talent coming from it. None other than the Moonlight Swordsman.
Ugh.
The sun filtered through the tall windows of the hotel lobby, casting warm light on polished marble floors. Students from all 5 academies filled the space, their distinctive uniforms making it easy to see who belonged where. The air was thick with tension, excitement, and just a little bit of arrogance, mostly from Eternum's group, who stood in their usual demeanor, looking down on everyone else. I mean, what would you expect from the academy that the novel follows? Silverleaf's group wasn't as large as the others, but I believed we could win, or at least that's what I wanted to tell myself. It was impossible to ignore the sideways glances from the other academies. Their whispers are just loud enough to catch the occasional weakest school, or do they even stand a chance?
I shrugged it off. Let them talk.
I wasn't here to entertain them. I walked into the lobby, the click of my boots on marble catching a few glances. The noise around me seemed to dim as I made my way toward my classmates.
Ah.
Estria, you're here. Professor Vivian's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She stood at the center of our group with her usual confident smile on the luscious red lips that I had recently kissed.
Yeah.
I replied simply, taking my place among the group. Some of my classmates looked nervous, their eyes darting to the larger groups from the other academies. Vivian clapped her hands, silencing everyone. All right, listen up. This competition is our chance to show the world what Silverleaf can do. I don't care what they say about us being the weakest. We're here to prove them wrong. Every one of you has worked hard to get here, and I expect you to fight like it. Her gaze lingered on me for a split second, and I knew exactly what she meant without her needing to say it. I straightened up, my hand instinctively brushing against the hilt of my sword. The competition hadn't even started yet, but I could feel the expectations, not just from Vivian but from my entire academy. Head to the registration desk, she continued.
Estria, you're with me.
The rest of you, stick together and don't get lost. I followed her as we moved towards the registration desk. The chatter in the lobby dissipated into the background, replaced by the sound of my own footsteps.
This was it.
The beginning of the academy competition. I'll destroy everyone. After the registration was all wrapped up, Vivian handed me a neatly folded outfit, a sleek black suit with silver embroidery. This is the leader's suit. She explained with an unusually serious tone. You'll need to wear it. Without waiting for me to respond, she guided me toward one of the changing rooms. The hotel we were staying at was relatively close to the grand stadium where the competition would happen.
Change your clothes.
I nodded, not bothering to question her this time. She didn't tease me this time, which was strange, but I got it. This competition is something serious, and even Vivian wouldn't joke about it. I slipped into the changing room and put on the suit. The fabric was light yet sturdy, fitting perfectly like it was tailored just for me. The silver embroidery gleamed faintly in the light, giving off an air of quiet authority. When I stepped out, Vivian's eyes scanned me from head to toe. This fits just right. I muttered, adjusting the sleeves slightly. Vivian stepped closer, a faint smile playing on her lips.
Almost.
Here, this part should be like this. She reached out and adjusted a small silver chain that ran across the chest of the suit, carefully positioning it so it rested neatly. Her hands were quick, precise, and surprisingly gentle.
Perfect.
Her lips curled into a satisfied smile as she stepped back to admire her handiwork.
Thanks.
I replied, glancing down at myself.
Now, let's go.
It's almost time. In a flash, we both disappeared from the hotel, arriving at a seemingly waiting room where the rest of the Silverleaf Academy was.
Estria.
We're almost entering the arena. One of my classmates blurted out as soon as he saw me, his voice shaking a little.
Relax.
Another chimed in, clapping him on the back.
We've got Estria.
If nothing else, he won't embarrass us.
Gosh.
Good job bringing down everyone's morale. I sighed, running a hand through my hair.
Don't worry, everyone.
I'll do my best to make sure we get through this. Just stick to the plan, alright?
Yes, sir. Damn.
What's up with that military greeting? Anyway, the other academies have already entered. It should be our turn soon, right? One of them suggested, and just as he expressed his words, the announcer's voice reached us. And now, last but not least, the Silverleaf Academy. I took a deep breath and straightened up, running a hand through my hair to push it into a more comfortable position, just in front of my eyes, making sure it wasn't in my way. The gates ahead of us creaked open, and we started walking toward the center of the stadium, where all the other academies were lined up with their flags. As we moved forward, the students in the back began waving our academy's flag proudly. As we reached the center, I could feel every set of eyes on me. Normally, this was where the academy leader gave some kind of speech or rallying cry. But I had something different in mind. I could feel the eyes of the crowd on me. There were the emperor, the empress, dukes, duchesses, everyone watching, waiting. This was a very prestigious moment after all.
Shing.
The sound of metal ringing through the air cut through the silence, sharp and clear. The sword gleamed in the sunlight, acting as a perfect mirror of the sky. I raised it high, pointing it toward the sky. The wind picked up around me, and I could feel the clouds shift. For a moment, everything was still, as if the world was holding its breath. Then, a silver thread of mana shot out from the tip of my sword, swirling in the air like smoke.
It sparkled in the light.
I pushed my hair back, focusing, and a crescent moon symbol appeared on my forehead, glowing just enough for everyone watching to notice. I swung my sword smoothly, and the mana wrapped around our group.
Swoosh.
The air felt heavier, charged with energy. The ground beneath me hummed with power. The wind picked up again, louder this time, almost like a storm was coming. The sky above seemed to darken a little. I swung my sword again, and the mana spread out, surrounding us.
Voom.
The energy pulsed in the air, but only around Silverleaf Academy. I stopped, holding the sword still. The mana hummed quietly around us, and the moon symbol in my eyes glowed faintly. The whole stadium went quiet. I let the pressure build for just a moment longer, and then I spoke. The Silverleaf Academy has arrived. As soon as the words left my mouth, the pressure exploded.
Crush.
A heavy weight slammed down on every other academy except ours. Some students from the other schools dropped to their knees, their faces covered in sweat. Others struggled to stay standing, their bodies shaking. I let the pressure lift just as fast.
The wind calmed down, and the sky lightened.
The crowd murmured, but I stood calm, feeling their eyes still on me. Behind me, my classmates quietly, with their excited gazes full of appreciation, stood. From the crowd, Vivian gave me a small, approving smile, not to mention the gazes full of interest coming from the high-order people. I could sense the intense emotions of the dukes, duchesses, barons, and even the empress. They were watching me with interest.
Yeah. This should be enough.
A small smirk tugged my lips. In the VIP section of the Grand Stadium, high above the roaring crowd, the most influential figures in the empire had gathered. Dukes, duchesses, and even the emperor and empress were seated in lavish chairs, their expressions calm yet curious as they watched the competition. The air was filled with quiet murmurs and the occasional clink of fine glassware. Elander, the sword duke, stroked his sharp beard as he leaned forward, his emerald cape catching the sunlight. That boy from Silverleaf, Estria. Did you see the energy around his sword? He's no ordinary student. Tell me, is he one of yours? Beside him, the Northern Duchess, Evelyn, a poised woman with striking light blue hair and piercing blue eyes, stood with her arms crossed. No, although his affinity is also ice like mine, it is the first time I have seen him.
However,
now I'm quite interested in him. Her lips curled into a small smile.
Haha.
It's really funny, this is the first time I have seen the Northern Duchess interested in someone. A rough voice came behind them, and immediately, both of their expression changed slightly as they replied politely.
Your Highness.
They greeted in unison, bowing their heads slightly. The man behind them chuckled warmly. No need for courtesies. We're here to enjoy the competition, aren't we? It was Francis Arthur Charles X, the current emperor of the empire. But I'll admit, he continued, stroking his chin thoughtfully, without even the need to fight, that boy made sure to explain that he wasn't here to play around. The emperor laughed softly. At his side, Empress Isabella leaned forward slightly, her eyes sparkling with quiet interest. Her gown, a masterpiece of midnight blue and silver threads, shimmered like starlight. "So this is the boy Ella mentioned," she murmured, almost to herself.
I like him.
But her words had reached the emperor, making him frown. "Ella is still too young. She's of marriageable age, Francis." Isabella replied with a sigh, her tone sharp but calm.
I don't care.
"She's my precious baby."
The emperor shot back.
Tisk. Overprotective as ever. Isabella clicked her tongue in annoyance. But deep down, she noted Estria's name. Meanwhile, their quiet exchange didn't go unnoticed. Whispers spread through the lower-ranked nobility seated nearby. A younger noble, perhaps a marquis, adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the arena. To think a student from Silverleaf would earn the favor of such a crowd. It's unheard of. Who could have trained him, I wonder? The nobles continued their murmurs, their eyes now frequently darting to Estria as if he were the only star in the night sky. This boy, the strongest from the weakest academy, had become the center of their attention, even before the first match had begun. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the academy competition." The crowd buzzed with excitement as the announcer's voice echoed through the huge stadium. "Today, the top 5 academies will battle to prove who's the best." The crowd roared, cheering and clapping. The rules for the first round. The announcer continued as his voice gathered everyone's attention. Each academy leader will draw a number. These numbers will decide the matchups. Since there are 5 academies, one will skip this round and advance straight to the next. For the matchups, each academy will send out a student for a one-on-one battle. Each win earns 1 point for the academy. The first to reach 5 points wins the round. Each academy will have 5 matches, except for the ones that get skipped, and after all matchups are finished, the 2 academies with the lowest scores will be eliminated. In the middle of the field, a table was brought in, draped in blue velvet. On it was a wooden box with a gold latch, simple yet elegant. "Academy leaders, step forward to draw your lots." The announcer called out. Immediately, the leader from each academy stepped forward, wearing a different uniform from the rest of the students of their academy. The leader of Eternum Royal Academy was first. It was none other than Ella. With her long wavy white hair and a navy and silver uniform that shimmered under the sunlight, she opened the box, selected a scroll with a flourish, and stepped back with a calm expression. Next, the leader of Beastkin Academy stepped forward. A massive lionkin with fiery red hair and sharp golden eyes, he grabbed his scroll without hesitation and returned to his spot, his tail swaying lazily. The Holy Academy's representative. At that moment, everyone focused on her. Because it was none other than the Saintess Christina. Her golden hair swayed slowly in the wind as her dim pink eyes looked forward. She selected her scroll delicately, as though handling something precious, before stepping back with a soft smile. The Sword Academy's leader came next, his tall frame and sharp, stoic features drawing a few murmurs from the crowd. His movements were mechanical and efficient, from picking the scroll to returning to his place without a word. Finally, it was Estria's turn. He stepped forward, aware of the eyes watching his every move. His hand slipped into the box, brushing against the remaining scroll. Without a glance, he stepped back to join the others. "Leaders, reveal your lots," the announcer said. One by one, the scrolls were unrolled. Ella held her up high, revealing a bold one. Beastkin's leader displayed a 2 as his grin turned sharp and confident. Christina revealed the number 1, glancing briefly at Ella with a faint smile. The Sword Academy leader revealed a 2. Finally, Estria opened his scroll. The number 3 looked back at him. At that moment, the announcer's voice rang out once more, full of excitement. "Here are the matchups. Eternum Royal Academy will face Holy Academy in the first match. Beastkin Academy will battle Sword Academy in the second match. Finally, the Silverleaf Academy with lot number 3 will skip this round and automatically advance to the next one, earning 1 point in their total score." Instantly, the whole stadium erupted in cheers as the results were announced. However, a few of them were thoroughly disappointed as Silverleaf had earned a free point. Lucky bastards. The students from the other academies couldn't but express their opinions, but as soon as Estria heard those words, he stopped in his tracks. "Ah, you guys want to die so soon?"
Shing.
He slowly sheathed his sword, and immediately, the students who were talking about Silverleaf's good luck retracted steadily. Letting out a scoff, Estria made his way back to his group. "That was so damn lucky." The students cheered between themselves, trying not to be so loud.
PFFF.
Estria put his sword back into its scabbard as he let out a small chuckle.
All right, everyone. Let's calm down.
Vivian said as she clapped her hands, gathering everyone's attention in her form. Now that we got 1 point in advantage, we only need to win 2 more, or simply get lucky enough. But don't relax. Take advantage of the time to watch the competition. Study them carefully and learn everything you can.
Yes.
The students replied in unison. Estrella nodded, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. He leaned against the railing as the first match was set to begin. Eternum Royal Academy and the Holy Academy sent their first fighters into the arena. Eternum's first representative was a boy named Run, clad in the Academy's elegant navy and silver uniform. His posture was perfect, his polished sword gleaming under the sunlight. On the other side was Holy Academy's pick, a petite girl named Mira. Dressed in the pristine white and gold of her school, she carried a staff adorned with an intricate crystal at the top. Her calm expression and the faint glow of divine energy around her hinted at immense power despite her unassuming appearance. The announcer's voice broke the tension. Let the first match begin. With a loud cheer from the crowd, the fight was on. Rin charged forward immediately, his sword cutting through the air in a precise arc. But Mira didn't flinch. She twirled her staff, planting it firmly in the ground as a golden barrier flared to life around her.
Clang.
Ren's sword struck the barrier, sending out a ripple of energy. The crowd leaned forward, captivated by the clash.
MHM.
As the fight continued on, Estrella was lost in his thoughts. He was very troubled as he continued reading the rules of the first round that had been granted to the professors in a scroll. And the thing that troubled him the most was the 7th article. 7th article. During one of the rounds, a student who had already been chosen to fight cannot participate again until the next round. That means Estrella cannot win the 5 points alone. He needs to defeat a student from the other academy, and then make sure 4 of his classmates win their match too, for the academy to be able to earn another point. So, Estrella closed the scroll and looked at every student in their station. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. At that moment, the symbol of a balance scale which is used in law, appeared on the pupils of his eyes. I'll make sure to figure out the weakness of each one of them. A red liquid flowed down his left eye.